Chapter 520. The bloody battle in front of the huge iron gate had reached its most brutal state. Roars, curses, and the sounds of heavy weapons clashing were the strongest sounds on the battlefield. Due to the aftermath of the intense battle, many of the torches' bases had been destroyed. The light in the tunnel gradually dimmed, and the torches that had fallen to the ground emitted the last bit of heat before they were extinguished. How long had this bloody battle lasted? How many of these savage green-skin monsters were there? Where did they come from? What kind of strength did they have? Would Duque, who had entered the Iron Gate, succeed? If they succeeded, how many of the people guarding here would be able to survive? Everything had already become a blur, as the people guarding the Iron Gate were already mentally numb. They instinctively waved the weapons in their hands, inhaling more of the bloody air with every breath they took. With every exhale, they let out the loudest roars they could muster. The chaotic wind in the tunnel blew at Uther's ear-length hair, and his brown hair swept across his cheeks. Unlike the other warriors whose eyes were bloodshot from the fierce battle, his most devout faith made him far more tranquil than the others. Uther's mouth was shouting the most majestic of slogans, but his ears were pricked up. It was as if he was standing and listening to a human epic being recited by a bard. The origins were long and magnificent. It was like a long wind that crossed the barriers of time and space, bringing the ideals of their distant ancestors and their wills to this place. In a daze, Uther saw countless illusory knights appear beside him, fighting side by side with them. Even though their faces were blurry, he could clearly see that they were humans. He suddenly understood who they were. Ancestors, kings, and all the heroic spirits who had fought for humanity. The Morning Star wizard behind Uther, Ronan, was unexpectedly powerful. With the support of an almost limitless amount of magic crystals, his violent arcane magic poured out in torrents in the entire tunnel. Any orc below the level of a chief would be instantly killed if they were hit by his magic. It was a pity that there were just too many orcs. For some reason, Uther thought of 2,800 years ago, when humans had just obtained magic power. A man raised his sword in front of the knights and said, "I swear on this sword that humans will bear the grace of the high elves and establish an eternal covenant. We will wipe out all evil creatures and give civilization and hope to the truly intelligent races. My people, my children, my grandchildren, will pass on my oath until the end of the world." More than 2,800 years ago, the flag of the Arather Empire was raised on the battlefield of the Arthi Highlands, reflecting the dawn of that day. Humans and high elves joined forces to fight against the green trolls. 2,800 years later, it was as if 3,000 years of history had overlapped. Humans and elves joined hands once again, but this time, their enemies had changed from the green-skinned trolls to the green-skinned orcs. 2,800 years ago, we had Thoradin the Great. Now, where is our new Thoradin the Great? While Wuther was talking to himself, the battle had reached its climax. The number of humans still standing in front of the Iron Gate could be counted on two hands. The nameless knights had all died in battle. But in front of them, there was still a sea of orc elites. Suddenly, a strange feeling that shook the entire stronghold surged towards everyone, covering the sky and covering the earth. Roar. From the deepest part of Grim Battle Fortress, a loud and clear roar came from within. It was the roar of a dragon. It was the roar of the life-giver, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza. The roar was filled with complicated emotions. There were almost all kinds of emotions. Sadness, displeasure, resentment, hatred, but most of all, joy. Joy for freedom. Joy for breaking free from the cage. And anger towards the enemy. An ominous feeling spread through every orc, as if the sky was about to fall on them. Not good. Could it be? Before Orgrim could finish, the huge iron gate suddenly opened. From the dark and deep hole, a magical light suddenly flashed like daylight. "Sorry, this is the could it be that you are afraid of. Alexstrasza has been liberated by me. Orcs, your doomsday is here." This was followed by a voice that was familiar and extremely hateful to the horde. Countless magical lights shot out from the inside, passing over the heads of the human knights and holy knights. It was like a waterfall of the Milky Way falling from the heavens, exploding into the orc army. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of explosions, other than the chieftains, there were no longer any orcs alive in the Dark Army. Even someone like Orgrim, who had amazing magic resistance, could not avoid being sent flying by the violent magic. The power of this magic, Duque? Every knight turned around in surprise. He did not disappoint anyone. Duque's not-so-muscular figure appeared in the middle of the gate. Behind him was a somewhat bashful Sasha. Nodding to everyone, Duque raised his head and shouted, "It's time!" Muradin. This was a voice that contained magic. It penetrated the walls and spread far away. Before the orcs could react from the explosion, they suddenly realized that there were many holes on both sides of the huge tunnel. Countless dwarves waved giant axes and warhammers as they came out of the holes that were only half the height of the orcs. They did not care about the consequences and started fighting. Muradin Bronzebeard was the first to attack. He raised his warhammer high. Brothers of Bronzebeard, for victory. For the future. For tomorrow. For our descendants, we will no longer live under the shadow of these greenskins. Kill! Kill! The Holy Knights, who were already exhausted, released their strongest notes since the start of the battle. The already dazzling holy light shone even brighter. They were like small suns that crushed towards the horde. No, impossible. It shouldn't be like this. Orgrim's fangs were as sharp as ever. The hammer of destruction that he wielded was still powerful. He could send more than 10 dwarven warriors flying or even kill them with a single sweep. However, all they could see were orcs struggling in despair. Every orc was worthy of the word valiant. But so what? They lost. This time he was truly defeated. Rexer could not save the horde. He, Orgrim, could not do it either. Even the Red Dragon army, which they relied on the most when they were reorganizing, would immediately rebel the moment their queen was freed. One could imagine the countless red dragons roaring and twisting their necks to bite the dragon-howling orcs that had been riding on their backs for so long to death. No. Only you. Duque, you must pay the price. Orgrim used all his strength to leap high into the air and throw his hammer of destruction at Duque. Chapter 521. Oh no. Don't dodge. At this moment, two completely different factions appeared among the Holy Knights. Those who were close to Duque all prioritized Duque's safety. No one thought that a mage should fight a warrior head-on. However, Uther shouted that he couldn't dodge. Because in that moment, Duque's figure overlapped with Thoradin the Great in Uther's eyes. Fighting head-on was a man's romance, and also a symbol of courage. If Duque considered himself a mage, then he definitely had a reason to dodge. A single flash would solve all his problems. If Duque wanted to become a true leader, then Duque definitely couldn't dodge Orgrim's attack. If he dodged, then he would lose the reason for everyone to follow him. What would Duque do? The answer was out. Duque pulled Sasha behind him with his left hand to prevent her from being affected by the flames. He then slowly pushed out with his right hand. Even if they weren't mages, the knights who didn't know anything about mystical domains could clearly feel the mana in the air surging. Finally, the blue arcane energy solidified. A terrifying aura surged out from Duke's hand, enough to pierce through the entire underground and spread out in all directions. The bright blue light collided with the hammer of destruction that Orgrim had thrown out. Uther regretted it the moment they collided. What a loss. Duque is going to lose. Right? Duque had only thrown out a ball of arcane energy, but Orgrim had thrown out a real semi-divine weapon. Both of them had great power, and usually, the one without a physical body would be at a disadvantage. However, Duque's use of power was ingenious, and it completely changed Uther's understanding of power. From the start, Duque didn't just use one power. Countless arcane bullets formed a continuous path of light. It looked like a river in the sky, or like a water droplet piercing through a stone that had been accelerated by 1,000,000 or even 10,000,000 times. In terms of pure strength, Duque's attack was not as powerful as Orgrim's. Orgrim's strike was strong enough, but it didn't have any aftershocks. Duque's attack was like the growth of all living things. It had a long source and was unable to shake his opponent in terms of quality, but it wasn't too far off either. Then he made up for it with quantity. Also, it wasn't just the quantity. The arcane missiles that Duque shot out seemed to have some kind of interval or rhythm. The continuous impact destroyed the power and momentum of the hammer of destruction. Of course, everything happened in an instant. If one didn't have amazing perception, they wouldn't be able to tell that Duque had lost first and then won. Everyone could only see that even Great Chief Orgrim's desperate attack could not shake Duke's terrifying aura that was as if a god of magic had descended from the heavens. The moment the two forces collided, the hammer of destruction couldn't shake Duque's magic power at all. The destructive red flames were forcefully shattered, and the blue arcane energy became the only dominant force on this path and on this bloody battlefield. The dim sky was like a remnant of light and shadow, and it was filled with dense blue cracks from the explosion of the arcane energy. For half a second, the entire hammer of destruction seemed to have stopped time, and it was frozen in midair before flying back. Awesome! Not only the surviving holy knights, but even the dwarven warriors who had just killed their way out all cheered. This wasn't the end. Duque suddenly placed his left palm on his right arm. The mana output was further increased. In front of everyone's astonished gazes, Duke actually poured out all the mana he could mobilize in his body at once. Boom! The arcane light arrow that had been shot out turned into a huge arcane light pillar. A beam of arcane light blasted over like a comet crashing down, shooting right into the long and wide passageway. In an instant, it set off an extremely terrifying tsunami. The violent arcane energy set off layers of huge waves, and with a shocking momentum, it surged towards the orcs. This arcane energy wasn't fast, but it could clearly be seen that this energy was spreading throughout the entire path at the speed of an arrow. Everything that came into contact with this energy, such as the walls and the ceiling of the cave, all shattered into pieces. This energy was like a black hole that devoured everything, destroying everything it touched. The first to touch this energy was an orc Chiliarch, and his huge and burly body was directly swallowed up. After letting out an extremely painful scream, his entire upper body completely exploded, leaving only two hairy legs that fell to the ground. At first, Muradin wanted to scold Duque for not being kind enough to even attack his dwarven ally, but after seeing it clearly, Muradin laughed. The killing range of this arcane light pillar was surprisingly based on the height of 170 meters above the ground. Unless the dwarves were courting death and activated Avatar, at this time, no dwarf in the world would be that tall. Faced with this extremely surging power coming at them at high speed, every orc only had two choices. One was to be like a heroic orc and fight head-on. The other was to lower their noble heads and avoid it. The choice that Orgrim wanted Duque to make was copied and pasted by Duque, and sent back to him. Orgrim hesitated. It was another choice between life and death. He could indeed tell himself, "I am the great chief, I should save my life, lower my head a little, and reorganize the orcs. As an invader, we will be successful even if we keep the rule of a continent." But if he did this, would he still be considered a brave orc? Would those heroic tribal warriors still treat him as the pride of their tribe? No. Orcs could accept defeat. Orcs could die in battle, but orcs would never allow cowardice. Hammer of Destruction had long been sent flying to who knew where. Just like that, Orgrim strode forward, and with a straight punch, he blasted out what might be the last attack of his life. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. Two burly figures suddenly appeared in front of Orgrim, blocking his path. In less than a tenth of a second, the first figure was suddenly hit by the arcane energy. Orgrim could clearly see that the orc's body instantly crumbled into pieces. And the second figure, which was much larger than the orc, was blasted away by Duque's power, crashing into the cave wall beside Orgrim and deeply embedded into it. At this moment, the weakened arcane energy finally landed on Orgrim. Chapter 522. No beastman knew how Duque had become so strong all of a sudden. As Duque's status rose, no one in the tribe could fight with Duque head-on and come back alive. And Orgrim's understanding of Duque was still at Stormwind City, when he attacked Stormwind's stronghold and fought with him directly. At that time, Duque gave Orgrim the feeling that if he had more time, he could still kill him. It was definitely not like now, where he felt an irresistible sense of powerlessness. Even after being weakened twice, Orgrim was still unable to withstand the full power of Duque's arcane spell. Countless times of superposition, the vibrating force instantly exploded on Orgrim's fist and spread throughout his body, making him feel as if he was going to be crushed into powder in the next moment. Although the battle-hardened Orgrim instinctively knew that he would not die from this attack and would at most be seriously injured, the feeling of not being able to take down a beansprout-like opponent like Duque made Orgrim feel like a hero at the end of his road. In that instant, he recognized that the one who stood in front for him was the Black Scar tribe's chief, Kashtrak. The second was the mixed-blood beastman hero, Lexa, whom the entire tribe had once despised and looked down on. As a mixed-blood beastman and ogre, he had a larger and sturdier body than beastmen. At the very last moment, the two heroes used their bodies to protect their great chieftain. "So I'm so weak that I need someone else to protect me?" Orgrim muttered to himself. This feeling was so desolate. Then, the excruciating pain that made the chief hover between life and death spread through him, and his vision went black. "Chief?" All the beastmen and chiefs exclaimed in shock. What was a leader? A leader was the backbone of a group, the soul and backbone of a group. No matter if it was because Orgrim had fought with Uther for so long and was only half injured, or because Duque had the upper hand in terms of technique, or because Duque had unleashed the Red Dragon Queen's aura to unleash such a shocking attack. In the eyes of both the Alliance and the Horde, it was Duque who killed Orgrim in one hit. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he would roar at it first. "Orgrim is dead. The Alliance will win. Kill!" Compared to the tribes whose morale first fell to the bottom and then fell into the abyss, the Alliance's side was like an aphrodisiac first and then on steroids. This was especially so for those unscientific paladins. In their peak condition, their radiance was even brighter than before. These guys actually broke through on the battlefield. He had broken through his own shackles. He had broken through the limits of his spirit and body. In terms of numbers and quality, the Horde still had the absolute advantage. However, in all directions in the sky and on the ground, the Horde was being slaughtered by the Alliance like they were vegetables. And at this crucial moment, Orgrim lost consciousness. A snake could not do without its head. Because the chief was unconscious, Zuluhid, who happened to be the vice commander, rode his dragon into the sky. The vice chief of the Blackrock tribe, Sabek, was at the front lines. The weakness of the lack of a unified command was magnified. Kargath Bladefist, who was more bloodthirsty and cruel, ordered them to fight it out with the Alliance. Kilrog Deadeye, who was more rational and resourceful, ordered a retreat. The two completely different orders created the greatest amount of chaos among the beastmen. If Orgrim and the others could break through the defensive line in front of the Iron Gate, then everything would be different. If Orgrim had not impulsively thrown out the Hammer of Destruction, perhaps the battle would still be in a stalemate. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. "Long live Duke Marcus!" they shouted. In every passageway, every pass, every gate, there were the silhouettes of the Alliance's warriors chasing after the Horde. Duque did not participate in this pursuit. Even though a Morning Star mage could continuously recover his mana, he was really exhausted. Ever since he had been ambushed by Ghoul, Dan and activated the curse, he had not been able to sleep well for a single day. The shadow of death had always been lingering around his soul. It was only when Alexstrasza, who had recovered her strength, instantly removed the curse and stopped the rapid loss of his life force, that he could finally take a breather. It was not easy for him to make a huge comeback and take the greatest credit. The small credit should be given to the people below him. He could not just eat the meat while his brothers below him did not even get to drink the soup. After confirming the Alliance's victory, Duque's legs suddenly turned to jelly. Beside him, Sasha hurriedly supported Duque. "Duque? Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little exhausted after a full-powered attack." Completely subconsciously, Sasha let Duque's entire body lean against her without a care in the world. The approaching masculine aura caused Sasha to be a little confused, but her heart was filled with pride. The world in front of her seemed to be a little blurry. The scenes described in the legends and reality intertwined. At this moment, it was as if she had returned to 2,800 years ago, when the humans and the High Elves worked together to expel the trolls in a dreamlike war. That was a war between the two races against the fate of death. Back then they had won everything. 2,800 years later, the new generation of elves and human heroes had once again returned to this battlefield, fighting for the sacred oath that had once again shone with glory. And today, the one leading all of this was the man leaning against her. A man who seemed weak but created miracles time and time again. A man who had protected her and saved her life. Sasha raised the longbow in her hands and shouted with all her might, "Long live Duque!" Unlike the relationship between Aurelia and Duque, Sasha did not have the entanglement of fate that the two of them had. If one had to use an adjective to describe her relationship with Duque, perhaps it could be summed up as fanatical worship. A natural fanatical feeling that had come from going through the trials of life and death. Facing Sasha, who suddenly turned around with a burning gaze and looked like she wanted to swallow him up, Duque was a little stunned. He then smiled bitterly. "I just feel like I've let Aurelia down." Sasha insisted. "What's wrong with that? The High Elves don't mind polygamy, nor do they mind polygamy. I don't believe that Big Sister won't be willing to share you with me." If I said if, there's no if. If there's really an if, I'll snatch you from Big Sister even if I have to shed all pretense of cordiality. We're all women, so why can't we snatch a good man? It's not in my character to silently back out and then wish the other party happiness. With that, Sasha directly gave Duque mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Chapter 523. Duque lost his moral integrity. As an old driver from Mount Akina, he didn't have much moral integrity to begin with. If not for Mediva's humanity, perhaps Duque's moral integrity would have been even worse. Of course, moral integrity was something that could be picked up after it was dropped. Gavin Rad returned after a short chase. When he and Ronan heard that Marion was actually Nisario's spy, their mouths were wide open. Marion is a spy? Ronan was the first to not believe it. He was rather innocent and didn't even dare to look at Marion's breasts, let alone find any traces of her. "When did you find out?" Gavin Rad touched the back of his head. Windsor wanted to know the answer to this question too. "I noticed something was wrong from the very beginning." Duque suddenly sneered. Most of the people in the circle of high elven mages are arrogant and prideful. The Silvermoon Parliament used the reason that Quel Salus made too many concessions to the humans during the Alliance back then, and tarnished Anastrian's reputation for 2,800 years. How could they suddenly show heartfelt respect for the newly established Rotterdam Alliance? Windsor was silent. It wasn't that Duque was wrong, but that Duque was right. The reason why the High Elves had the ancient name Quel Dorii was because of their unwillingness to be exiled, as well as their pride and self-satisfaction. Logically speaking, everyone knew that without the alliance, Quel Salus would be destroyed at any moment. Knowing it was one thing, but accepting it emotionally was another. To be honest, Windsor knew very well that until now, not many of the High Elves regarded themselves as part of the alliance. Even though most of the people sent to participate in the war against the tribes this time were rangers who were considered to be of low status in the country. And the mages led by Marion were the only exception. Why would a powerful Radiant Moon mage, a Silver Moon Parliament member, deign to come and lick Duque's boots? Others couldn't figure it out. Only Duque himself knew that Marion might be one of Nisario's people. In the history of Azeroth that Duque was familiar with, there was no mention of Marion Firewing. Throughout history, there were not many members of the Silver Moon Parliament. To Duque, the members of the Silver Moon Council were a group of passers-by who were considered powerful at this point in time. The problem was that a powerful Radiant Moon wizard had suddenly appeared in this group of passers-by and directly participated in the process of saving the Red Dragon Queen. Duque immediately raised his guard against Marion. If there were any variables that would affect the course of history, the biggest variable would naturally be Duque himself, followed by Marion. As a high and mighty Silver Moon counselor, it could be said that he had been cheated by his teammates in the Alliance's war. However, a senator who had been loitering in various salons for thousands of years, making a living out of art and music, and who prided herself on being extraordinary and noble, risked her life to follow a cursed and dying Alliance deputy commander to play an adventure of infiltrating the enemy's rear. If Duke still couldn't figure out which side she was on, then Duke must be out of his mind. Therefore, after Duke was killed by Deathwing, Duke refused to resurrect immediately. He was waiting for Marion to jump out herself. Sure enough, she came. In his calculations, Duke didn't expect Sasha to rush in. Fortunately, Marion, like Necros, was overly reliant on the power of Demon's soul, which was why she was knocked out with a brick. During the subsequent body search, Duke also accidentally found something, another piece of Neserio's scale. It also had the effect of brainwashing. After pondering for a while, Duque decided to promise Alexstrasza to hand over this bad elf who tried to control her and humiliate her again to the Red Dragon army. I promise I won't kill her, Her Majesty the Queen said. Marion, you're on your own. Duque couldn't imagine how the Red Dragon Queen, who had suffered so much, would vent her anger on Marion. Now, Duque had two scales with Deathwing's soul in his hands. Looking at the remaining 1/5 of the platinum disc that had lost its demonic aura, Duque smiled evilly. Duque, why do I feel like you're a little naughty? Sasha muttered. No, I'm suddenly thinking about how Ghoul Dan will die after activating my death curse. He'll die. This time, everyone was shocked. One had to know that Ghoul Dan was a horde powerhouse who had fought 100 rounds with Antonidas to a draw. If not for his betrayal, the outcome of the Lordaeron battle might have been rewritten. Now, Duque suddenly said that Ghoul Dan would die? Normal people can't do anything to Ghoul Dan. To be honest, even if two Breaking Dawn wizards of the Alliance work together, they might not be able to kill him. Duque smiled mysteriously. Then how can Ghoul Dan die? Ronan asked. Duque couldn't stop laughing. Of course, mortals can't kill a demigod warlock like Ghoul Dan. But Ghoul Dan's mistake is that he shouldn't have courted death and opened Sargera's tomb himself. What? Sargera's tomb? When did the boss of the Burning Legion have a tomb? Ghoul Dan was currently on an island in the Broken Islands of the Endless Sea. The once beautiful temple was now just a ruined mound. However, the ruined appearance did not matter to him. He could feel a powerful pulse coming from the bottom of the temple. The powerful force tugged at him like an electric current, and he could feel that the whole building was shaking under its influence. Hurry up and go in. He shouted to his warlocks. We have to go in. In reality, he was considering whether to bring his subordinates in. He knew that Sargera's tomb was inside, and there was the Eye of Sargera's inside. It had godlike power, but should he go alone or share this power with the rest of the Shadow Council? In the end, he made up his mind. Since he didn't know what else was in this ancient temple, he felt that it was best to bring them along. If necessary, he could kill them when he found Sargera's eye. Entering the bottom of the temple, Ghoul Dan found an extremely powerful seal. It was a seal from Aegwynn, the previous World Guardian. Aegwynn's seal targeted almost every intelligent creature in the world of Azeroth, except for the beastmen from Draenor. Gujar easily broke the seal made by the previous guardian, Aegwynn. He pulled hard, and the door of the tomb opened. In the next second, endless demons drowned Ghoul Dan and his subordinates. Chapter 524. Orgrim had a very dark dream. Not to mention torches, even the light created by the shaman's natural magic could not penetrate it. The darkness was so cold that his fingers quickly froze. Even his breath quickly turned into ice crystals and fell to the ground. However, in front of him, the darkness slowly and silently wriggled and condensed into the shape of a human. When the dark humanoid opened its eyes, the whole world became even darker. Looking at the pair of eyes that seemed calm and wise, but were actually fierce and lifelike, Orgrim cried out in shock. You are Duque? Duque smiled evilly. Orgrim, you and your tribe will pay for the bloody massacre you caused when you invaded the world of Azeroth. I declare that you will be imprisoned for eternity. No, we are not wrong. The ones who are wrong are the demons. They poisoned us. They tricked us into drinking that terrible blood. Ignoring Orgrim's protest, the entire world became even darker. Countless dark arms reached out from all directions, firmly suppressing Orgrim's resistance. While laughing eerily, they approached Orgrim and finally grabbed him, throwing him into an eternal prison made of divine power. As long as I, Duque, exist, the tribe can forget about becoming the overlord of this world. Duque's evil laughter echoed endlessly in Orgrim's mind. Orgrim suddenly sat up and screamed, scaring the orcs around him. When he opened his eyes, Orgrim realized that he had just had a nightmare. Great Chief, you're awake? His face was clearly in a sorry state, and even 2 of his fangs were broken, but Zulud had a bright smile on his face. Zulud, I was made a fool of by a dragon cub that couldn't be raised properly. Don't worry, I'll slaughter him and make a stew for myself. At this time, Orgrim realized that all the orcs around him looked like a defeated army. He was carried on a simple stretcher. He heard a loud crashing sound. If he was not wrong, he should be near a giant rock dam. Even though he had a bad feeling, Orgrim still asked, "How's the battle going?" Without hiding anything, Zulud replied, "Terrible." The moment that damn dragon queen regained her freedom, the Dragon Roar tribe's cavalry became snacks for the giant dragons. Then, the giant dragons immediately gathered together and attacked the orcs gathered outside grim battle. Of the hundreds of thousands of orcs, not even half of the tribe survived. Everyone was knocked unconscious. Hearing this, Orgrim felt a sharp pain in his heart. It's all over. It's all over. If it wasn't for the Red Dragon Legion, they would not have been able to. But now, even if the Red Dragon army really didn't like to get involved in mortal wars like the rumors said, the destruction of these troops in the wetlands was enough to cause the greatest adverse impact on the overall situation. Looking at the sky in the distance, there were a few giant dragons flying at high speed. It was obvious that they were in an intense battle. Once upon a time, when he received the report that the Black Dragon King might participate in the battle to liberate the Red Dragon Queen, Orgrim and Zuluhid cursed Deathwing for being a busybody. Although he didn't know what role Deathwing played in this incident, Orgrim suddenly hoped that Alexstrasza and her Crimson Dragon Legion would be the victor of this cruel aerial battle. At the same time, on top of Grim Battle Peak, Gavin Rad and the others were dumbfounded. After the battle with the Horde, not only did you, as the Alliance's Deputy Commander-in-Chief, not manage the overall situation, you actually had the nerve to come and watch the show. It was one thing to watch the show, but what was the meaning of taking out so many things? Even if you were a bystander, you should at least have a sense of propriety, right? Looking at what Duque took out from his inventory, everyone was dumbfounded. It was a round dining table with a white tablecloth. 4 gorgeous golden wine glasses were placed on the white tablecloth, and the glasses were filled with freshly opened bottles of red wine. The plates, which were as clean as new, were filled with all kinds of snacks. It was a pity that fresh fruits could not be stored in the inventory. Otherwise, this would have been a perfect picnic. "Brother, what are you playing at?" Duque warmly greeted everyone. He pulled out a stool and sat down. "Everyone, don't stand on ceremony. Sit, sit, sit. I've activated the Phantom Mist. Nesario can't see us." "Duque, this doesn't seem like a good idea. What's wrong with it?" "I'm already giving him face by not making cola popcorn." None of the natives of Azeroth knew what cola popcorn was. Seeing that Duque was acting cool, everyone sat down suspiciously. It was Sasha who was the most curious, who adapted the fastest. She took a sip of the wine and ate the biscuits. "Duque, we're here to watch the show?" "Of course we're here to watch the show. The civil war between the 5 dragon aspects of Azeroth is a once-in-a-lifetime event. If you don't watch it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Furthermore, Nesario actually wants to brainwash me into becoming his slave. I don't have the ability to participate in such a great battle. I'm happy to watch him get beaten up like a dog. Come, everyone place your bets. How many minutes can Nesario last from now on? Those who win will get double the compensation." Nisario is the king of the black dragons, after all. 10 minutes. I'll bet a copper. After hanging out with Duque for so long, Gavin Rad had a tendency to fall in the direction of the shame of the paladins. Ronan thought for a moment. A magic jade. 15 minutes. Duque rolled his eyes. Damn it, I was the one who gave you your magic jade. Sasha was the most generous. I'll bet my entire fief that Deathwing won't last 5 minutes. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Hey! That's enough. Sasha was unmoved. First of all, my legendary fief is still in the hands of the orcs. Second, if I really lose all my fief, then I'll live in Karazhan. Duque's facial muscles kept twitching. He really didn't know that Sasha had such a petulant side to her. If she won, the fief would be doubled, but if she lost, she would blame it on him. It seemed like this lady was going to win no matter what. At this moment, in the sky, the battle between the 5 dragons had entered a white-hot stage. In the beginning, Deathwing was suppressing the 3 giant dragons and beating them fiercely. How fierce was he? Just like Lu Bu. However, when Duque destroyed Demon Soul. Chapter 525. Time went back to more than 10 minutes ago. Deathwing was blasted to the ground by Maligos, the king of magic. Naturally, he was furious. While flying backward at high speed, Deathwing's body grew rapidly, from a small black humanoid to a terrifying existence that was nearly 100 meters long and had a wingspan of tens of meters. Almost at the same time he appeared, the red dragons soaring in the sky also noticed him. Awoo! Without the slightest hesitation, all the red dragons in the sky ignored the orders of the orcs on their backs and attacked Deathwing crazily. Originally, the red dragons did not want to listen to orders from the bottom of their hearts. Coupled with the hatred they had with the black dragons, it had lasted for 10,000 years since ancient times. This hatred, so thick that it could not be dispelled, caused the red dragons to completely lose their minds. Idiots! Looking at these little red dragons, Nisario sneered. At least a dozen red shadows streaked across the sky and flashed towards Deathwing. However, in front of the Black Dragon King who had revealed his true form, these young red dragons were really not enough. That's right, it was different from the 2 red dragons that had ambushed him previously. This was Nisario's perfect form. In contrast to the further enlargement of his body, there was a more terrifying speed, reaction, strength, and vitality. Deathwing dealt with these red dragons so easily that it reminded people of swatting mosquitoes. A single flap of his dragon's wings could tear a red dragon that could not even be dealt with by an entire human army into pieces. A sweep of the dragon's tail could shatter the spine of a dragon that was more than 30 meters long, shattering its body into pieces. In less than half a minute, there were no red dragons that could fly in the entire sky except for him. Deathwing flapped his wings and grabbed a seriously injured dragon high up with his left claw, roaring to celebrate his victory. Blood was still oozing from the deep wound on the victim's chest and abdomen, and his claws also had burn marks. That was the price of touching the acid poison that flowed out of the fire patterns on the black dragon's body. None of the opponents the Wings of Death had encountered had been able to escape this. Are there any more idiots who want to die? Nisario shouted in dragon language. Along with the shout, Deathwing let out a deafening roar. He wanted to let all existences know that he was the supreme overlord, be it the sky or the earth. However, in response to him were several roars from the direction of the grim battle fortress. It turned out that there was more than one idiot who dared to come to die at this time. Deathwing soon discovered them. There were actually 3 idiots, and they were not just 3 ordinary idiots. The beautiful and elegant green, the gorgeous and dazzling blue, and the mysterious and strange earthy color, these 3 colors in his field of vision truly evoked Nisario's ancient memories. Only at this moment did Deathwing confirm that those fellows weren't simply sneakily attacking him through the Emerald Dream. They were truly participating in the battle. Isra, Nozdorm, and my good friend Maligos. Nisario's dragon had a very human-like expression of mockery on his face. Your reckless actions must come to an end, brother. Isra, the Queen of Dreams, said calmly. Brother? I have never been your brother, Isra. Open your eyes and face reality. Now, there is nothing that can stop me from creating this new era that belongs to our dragon race. The Supreme Dragon King, Deathwing? Izura said sarcastically. The Black Dragon King nodded shamelessly. Not bad. This honorable title is indeed worthy of my strength. However, Izura, to prevent your scales from getting hurt, you'd better go back to your dream and sleep. And you, Nosdorm? Aren't you busy playing with mud every day? Ha! You bunch of idiots, have you forgotten who is the real strongest here? To deal with the three of you, I can give you 2 claws. You're dead. As if reflecting his anger, Nosdorm twisted his body, and the huge dragon body made of sand shone with a golden brilliance. At the same time, his gem-like eyes also emitted a dazzling light. I've changed my mind, Nisario. I want you to become my collection in advance. Tisk. Deathwing spat out a corrosive breath disdainfully. What about you, Maligos? Don't you have anything to say to your old friend? Astacasta? A series of ancient dragon words sounded very elegant, but when translated, it actually meant one thing. F***ck your whole family of females. As a bonus for the answer, the Blue Dragon King opened his huge mouth. A stream of ice shot out from the crisscrossed fangs, crossed the void of 1,000 meters, and accurately brushed past Deathwing's body. No, it was not that Maligos was too accurate, but that Deathwing did not even bother to dodge. As soon as the ice particles came into contact with the terrifying black dragon's body, millions of small crab-like parasites immediately appeared. These insects desperately wanted to tear off the black scales and flesh. Deathwing snorted coldly, and acid sprayed out from the fiery red patterns on his body. As if covered in a mask, the dragon's entire body was wrapped in sticky black acid. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Countless miserable screams sounded, and almost all the magical creatures released by Maligos died in an instant, leaving only a few. The black dragon skillfully picked up one of the insects with his claws and swallowed it in one gulp. He smiled at the enemies in front of him, revealing a row of sharp teeth. So weak that I'm ashamed to be associated with you. It's all because of your conspiracy back then, Izura said coldly. Ha! You can only blame yourselves for being too stupid to be deceived. Alright, since you're all as weak as insects, then you should end up like these insects. Nisario suddenly let out an earth-shattering roar and pounced on his opponent. The 3 dragon aspects used all their skills. Maligos' gorgeous magic that could destroy a human city was not dodged by Deathwing. If it were to pierce through a soap bubble, it would be easily broken. Nosdormu's time ability did affect Deathwing, but from the looks of it, the impact would not exceed 2%. It was completely harmless. Izura's mental power attack was more effective, which also caused her to have to bear the most attacks. The battle was one-sided. The 3 dragon aspects used various physical and magical means to attack the Wing of Death, but Neltharion resolved all of them effortlessly. No matter how hard they attacked, the cruel fact would not change. Due to the fact that they had contributed a large part of their power to create the dragon soul, these dragon aspects were as weak as newborn babies compared to Deathwing. Chapter 526. The disparity in strength between the 2 sides was too great. This could not be considered a battle at all. If one had to add a definition to such a duel, it would be plain. In addition to the characteristics of the dragon aspects, the 3 dragons were actually not specialized in melee combat, not even Nosdormu. He was more inclined towards techniques and special abilities. In the end, the 3 dragon aspects, who were equally famous 10,000 years ago, were chased around like rabbits being chased by Deathwing. Anyone who saw this scene would feel a sense of suffocation. Even Deathwing, who was part of the duel, could not stand it anymore. He could not help but mock. Poor and sad fellows, is this the limit of your strength? Your strength can't even tickle me, and this is the attack you made with the determination to die? Laughable, too laughable. There was no real anger, nor was there a desperate charge of death. The 3 dragon aspects seemed to be holding their breaths as they fought with Deathwing. This made Deathwing feel a little bad. Ha! What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for me to be exhausted and reveal a flaw? Are you waiting for the so-called miracle to happen? Or are you waiting for Alexstrasza to break free and join the siege? Ha! I'm dying of laughter. For me, what's the big deal if one more ant joins the battle? That's not necessarily the case. It was rare for Isra to open his eyes a slit. A psychedelic light flowed out from the dragon's eyelids, making him look very mysterious. I was prepared to persuade Nosdormu and Malygos to join me and fight to the death with you, but an interesting human gave us a better choice. Human? Wait, are you talking about Duque? Deathwing seemed to be a little panicked. Yes, only a human's dream could bypass his surveillance and directly contact Isra. That's right. At this time, the cunning Black Dragon King suddenly showed a mocking expression. Idiot! I've never trusted this slippery fellow. He doesn't know what my goal is at all. He can't control the demon's soul, and he doesn't know the incantation to control Alexstrasza. Nesario put forth a great deal of arguments, and they sounded very much like the case. At this moment, Malygos, the king of magic, spat. That kid doesn't need those things. The king of time, Nosdormu sneered. For a character that doesn't exist in the timeline, he has the ability to ignore the maze of lies and directly walk from the beginning to the end. Nesario, you seem to have forgotten that you gave that kid a piece of your scale. The demon's soul can't resist your power. Impossible? How did you know? We just know it. Nosdormu's words were like the curse of death, firmly grasping Nesario's heart. He suddenly realized that he could only count on the female elf who had fallen after being hypnotized and seduced by him. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Almost as soon as Nosdormu sentenced him, a colorful light rose from the bottom of the stronghold. Three dragon roars sounded almost at the same time. The three dragon aspects in front of him seemed to have become larger, as if they had been inflated. Suddenly, their bodies expanded by 3 times, and they became existences about the same size as Nesario. This was not a simple, meaningless transformation spell. This was a change on the level of power. From quality to quantity, it was a change in strength. It was not one dragon, but 3 at the same time, and the same change had occurred. Impossible! The Black Dragon King was suddenly captivated by the chill. This level of power was both unfamiliar and familiar. 10,000 years. It had been a full 10,000 years. Ever since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when he deceived the 4 dragon aspects and injected their souls and power into the dragon's soul, he had never regarded his 4 siblings as opponents. And now, he felt the changes in the 3 dragons in front of him. Even if Nesario didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his originally perfect plan seemed to have made a fatal mistake. Duque. Hey, Isra. Nosdormu. Do you feel it? Do you feel it? Malygos repeated his question to his siblings nervously. I've regained my power. All the magical elements are crawling in front of me. How perfect! It's time. Nosdormu replied. His gem-like eyes flashed with an unusually bright light, and he asserted like a charlatan, "That's right, fate has shifted. I see that your death has been greatly advanced, Nesario. It's time." Isra opened her charming eyes. At that moment, her eyes were so eye-catching that Deathwing could only try his best to avoid meeting her psychedelic gaze. "The 10,000 years of nightmare is over," she murmured. "Our dream of restoring the glory of the dragon race for 10,000 years is finally coming true." At that moment, a clear and melodious roar of a dragon rushed into the sky from the Grimbator fortress below. Within a few seconds, a huge red dragon shadow began to expand rapidly in the vision of the 4 dragons. The life-giver, the red dragon queen Alexstrasza, had appeared. At that moment, if Nesario still maintained his human form, his face would be darker than the bottom of a pot. Unfortunately, he was already an ugly and ferocious black dragon. Naturally, he could not be darker. "Sister, are you all right?" Alexstrasza nodded her huge dragon head. "Compared to the torture I've endured, I've gained more. What we lost 10,000 years ago has been returned to us. Demon soul. That damned demon soul no longer exists. The insignificant human that you despised, Duke Marcus, destroy him." Alexstrasza's declaration resonated with the other 3 dragon aspects. They all roared in joy. Impossible! Deathwing roared. Lies. All lies. How could someone as wise as me be fooled by a mere human? Impossible, you must be lying to me. The Red Dragon Queen spread her sky-covering wings and revealed her sharp and huge claws. Despite the torture she had suffered when she was imprisoned, she did not look weak at all. Alexstrasza corrected him. The only lie that needs to be corrected is your so-called invincibility. Now, use your body to experience whether we have recovered our strength or not. That's right, Nozdormu said hatefully. I've always wanted to prove that it's a ridiculous theory. Chapter 527. Returning to the present, when Duque assumed the posture of an onlooker, he happened to run into the 4 dragons who had recovered their strength and were fighting each other. It would be perfect if there were kebabs or hot pot at this time. That was what Duque thought. Duque casually asked Gavin Rad, "Say, do you think Nesario would feel F***ked when he suddenly found out that his old opponent had regained his strength?" It was the first time the paladin had heard the word F***ked. The word was so vivid that it made him look like he was constipated. The mating of a dragon and a dog. Will a new species called a dragon dog be born? Ronan thought very seriously. Sasha was already laughing. What dragon dog? It was clearly Duque teasing Nesario. Duque squinted his eyes and looked at the Dragon King who had been beaten like a dog in the air. He felt great. The word F***ked wasn't enough to describe Nesario's current mood. Wings of Death was indeed suffering. His current situation was like a person teasing a few puppies. At first, he thought that the other party was just a few huskies, but then he realized that they weren't huskies. If it wasn't a dog but a wolf, then forget it. In the end, he realized that the other party had skipped the level of a wolf and went straight to the level of a 3-headed hellhound. Wings of Death found that he was being attacked by 4 types of elemental powers that were almost unfamiliar to him. In the past, when he fought these opponents, it was like he was beating up their illusions. Every move had a gorgeous appearance, but it couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. Now it was completely different. He was facing the full force of the 4 dragons, and their strength was comparable to his. 1 hit would be very painful, 2 at the same time would be injured, 3 at the same time would be seriously injured, and 4 at the same time would really make him kneel. Nesario was shocked to find that he couldn't resist the combined attack of the 4 dragons at all. Low-level and low-density magical elements couldn't possibly impact the denser high-level magical elements, so the frost or fire elemental magic that Malygos had blasted at him couldn't shake him at all. The only thing that was more effective was the cloud that Malygos had brought that made him feel a little suffocated. This kind of auxiliary magic that wrapped around his throat and nostrils made him quite angry. What about now? The attacks from Malygos tended to be more direct. The Dragon Queen of Malygos had died at the hands of Neltharion back then, so the Blue Dragon King was furious to the extreme. The attack power of this crazy dragon was almost on par with his. Countless icicles with electricity shot towards Nesario from all directions, and the heat and cold descended on the Black Dragon King at the same time. Although the enchanted plate armor embedded in the black dragon skin could eliminate most of the violent magic storm, it did not mean that the Deathwing could rest easy. That was because the enchanted plate armor was beginning to loosen. Once the plate armor fell off his body would collapse before the other dragons could attack him. Previously, Nozdormu could only speed up the passage of time on Deathwing's body, making him endure the torture of years and slightly drawing away his power. Nozdormu unleashed the quicksand of time on him, continuously stealing the vitality of Deathwing. Deathwing felt weak all over, and the bones in his body stiffened. The most terrifying thing was that even his thinking had become slow. If it was before, Deathwing could stir up the chaotic power in his body and evaporate the quicksand completely before these effects caused permanent damage. But now, Deathwing panicked to find that if he allowed Nozdormu's time power to work endlessly, he would be running in the direction of idiocy, never to return. However, for Deathwing, among the 4 enemies, the most cunning and dangerous one was Isra. Previously, Neltharion, who had already trained multiple dragon traits under the whispers of the ancient god Enzos, could easily sweep away the dreams that Isra had created in his mind. At this time, under the attacks of Malygos and Nozdormu, his energy had been seriously scattered. Relatively, his resistance to the mental domain had also decreased a lot. Isra could easily invade his mind and lead him to the most terrifying nightmare. He seemed to have realized that the nightmares he had created previously were not effective, because this terrifying ancient dragon had seen countless horrors, bloodshed, and cruelty. It was not an easy task to disturb his mind. This time, Isra provided some more absurd nightmares to Deathwing according to the script provided by Du. Although he was in the middle of a fierce battle, Neltharion was daydreaming. I'm a dairy, my name is Leo. I'm a single dog, dragon. My wife ran away, and I don't know where my children, Lien and Xia, have gone. As the Double 11 is coming, I have nowhere to go, so I can only go on Taba at home. But I'm so lonely. I really want to get drunk and forget all my worries. I only bought 2 bottles of wine. Why did my pair of claws get chopped off? Is this the so-called chopping off your hands on Taba? Although he knew that it was a dream, this absurd and incomprehensible dream involved too much of Neltharion's mind. When he came back to his senses, he found that Alexstrasza had already attacked him with a fierce spell that even he did not expect. Adash, Neltharion screamed. Even his fine gold armor could not mitigate the terrible impact of this attack. Deathwing immediately released a powerful shield to resist, but he was already injured. His body endured pain that he had not experienced for decades. Just as he was about to fight back, the daydream came again. This time, he turned into a black dog. My name is Black Gooden. My beloved Xiao Hua has eloped with the old Wang dog next door. I'm so sad. Master Enzos is so unscrupulous. He even fed me expired dog food. Woo-woo. Neltharion had no time to react to what was going on. The pain came again. When he came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that a huge piece of plate armor on his chest had been torn off by the red dragon. The pain of the wound itself was bearable, but what frightened him the most was that he suddenly found that his body was showing signs of cracking again. At this time, Alexstrasza flew in front of him like a goddess of vengeance. She glared at Deathwing, but there was still a trace of pity in her eyes. You have to pay for your conspiracy and betrayal. You will experience all the pain that I have experienced, Black Dragon. Let's see if you can feel better than me. Chapter 528. The momentary panic quickly subsided. Nesario was indeed Nesario, the peerless dragon who had dared to trick more than half of the dragons back then. In addition to being sinister and cunning, his unparalleled ruthlessness and ferocity were also part of his multiple personalities. A furious roar rang out, and a shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye rippled out, causing the remaining clouds in the surroundings to scatter. Deathwing launched a counterattack. A huge sphere made of pure dark energy appeared between his front claws. The dark light that flowed out of the sphere was like a black hole that attracted the attention of the 4 dragons. Then he threw the energy sphere behind Alexstrasza to the left, where the other 3 dragons were. The Red Dragon Queen tried to block it, but the terrifying dragon breath that she spewed out had yet to touch the sphere when the dark energy exploded. It suddenly split into 3 huge black arrows of light that drew zigzagging arcs in the sky. They strangely ignored the defense and evasion of the 3 dragons, and directly hit their bodies. Bam! This attack caused Isra and the other 2 giant dragons to roll back. Alexstrasza tried to use her dragon tail to slap Nesario, but she was trapped by the acidic mist spewed out from the right hind leg of the Black Dragon King. The corrosive mist with dark power stained her tail, and she had no choice but to spray a small dragon breath on her tail to purify it. After easily forcing the 4 dragons to retreat, Deathwing snarled contemptuously, "Fools! Show me all your ultimate moves. The result will not change. I am the embodiment of power. You are nothing but afterimages of the past in front of me." Nesario's arrogance was justified. When the Titans created the 5 dragon aspects, the strongest was originally Malygos, the king of magic, followed by Nesario, who had the power of the earth. However, after Nesario used Demon Soul to severely injure Malygos, kill the Blue Dragon King, and annihilate almost the entire Blue Dragon race, Nesario became the boss. Now that Demon's soul was destroyed, the 4 dragons had only regained their past power. It did not mean that they had completely recovered from their injuries. Therefore, in terms of individual combat power, the Wing of Death, Nesario, was definitely the well-deserved leader. Moreover, there was another problem. Because they had lost their power for over 10,000 years, the 4 dragon aspects were a little unfamiliar with their own power. Obviously, Nesario didn't understand what it meant to be cool for less than 3 seconds. In the next round, he was about to be taught to be a dragon. Malygos' large-scale magic bombardment interfered with his vision. Nozdormu's slow and Isra's nightmare attack arrived at the same time. Deathwing realized that the Red Dragon Queen had removed another piece of plate armor from his thigh. Intense pain that penetrated deep into his heart. Black Dragon, don't underestimate us opponents from the past. Alexstrasza's crimson shadow filled Deathwing's vision. The 4 great dragons worked together so perfectly that even he was a little surprised. What surprised him even more was that the 4 great dragons, for some reason, knew his weakness very well. Their spells were the same as before, unable to cause any substantial damage to him. With his own strength and the protection of the plate armor embedded under the dragon's skin, no one could hurt him in a direct attack. However, tearing off his alloy plate armor was different. They didn't even need to do anything. His own violent power would destroy him. It would have been fine if it was just once, but 2 consecutive targeted attacks made the Black Dragon King shudder. However, Deathwing wasn't someone who would give up so easily. Even if his weakness was exposed, it didn't mean that he would surrender. The dragon aspect's arrogance and insanity drove him. Underestimate? I don't need to underestimate you. What's in front of you is the absolute difference in strength. Your combat skills are far inferior to mine. Nesario turned to look at Isra. The key to your attack is on Isra. As long as I withstand her nightmare, I'll be able to kill her. As long as I withstand her nightmare, you can't do anything to me. The Red Dragon Queen's expression changed. The 4 great dragons understood that no matter who fought Deathwing in close combat, they wouldn't be able to do well. If Isra couldn't make him pause for a short while and reveal a flaw, then it would be difficult to fight this battle. However, of course, they wouldn't believe it. The 4 dragons launched their combined attack again. Unfortunately, as Nesario said, he began to resist Isra's nightmare. He even began to affect Isra in the spiritual domain, causing his crazy dreams to invade Isra. The 4 great dragons tried to make a melee attack, but the effect was terrible. Nesario, who was more agile, used his tail to send Alexstrasza flying. His wings slapped Isra and Malygos' heads, and his left claw opened up a huge hole of more than 20 meters in Nozdorm's chest. If Nozdorm wasn't a dragon made of sand and metal, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't kneel down. Nesario said triumphantly, So what if you've recovered your strength? The era of the 4 of you is over. After I kill you all, I'll steal all the eggs of your races and create a perfect world that belongs to me. At this time, in the communication circuit that Isra had constructed with dreams, the 4 great dragons were discussing urgently. What do we do? My magic doesn't have any effect on him. Malygos was a little discouraged. I'm too slow. I still can't keep up after slowing him down. Nozdorm gritted his teeth. If Sister Isra can still control him, Alexstrasza said unwillingly. At this time, Isra suddenly said weakly, Actually, I still have a dream that I haven't used. That was given to me by Duque. Why not? The 3 great dragons said in unison. Because it's too bad. Isra felt like crying. Malygos, who hated Deathwing the most, immediately asked, What dream is it? Let me see. Isra hesitated for a second while Wings of Death was talking nonsense, but he still released the dream. The Red Dragon Queen's face couldn't get any redder. Nozdorm said, This must be noted down. Malygos spat. TSK, she's not my Dragon Queen, why not send it? Isra was speechless. Finally, Alexstrasza said shyly, Let's vote. Those who think it can be used raise their claws. 2 firm male claws and 2 weak female dragon claws were raised. Hey, it's unanimous. The next moment, the 4 great dragon aspects attacked again. This time, Izura released a new nightmare for Nisario. In the dream, a very fake black female dragon was being attacked by a Shiba Inu that was full of Photoshop marks. All of this was not the point. The point was that Nisario immediately recognized that the black female dragon was Sinestra, well, his wife. Chapter 529. It was the animal world. It was often shown on CCTV. Hadn't they seen a dog that grew up with a lion in the zoo making a scene with a lioness? Those who hadn't seen it should go and make up for it. Was this dirty? No, this was definitely not dirty. People with dirty minds would think of bathing at the sight of water, and would think of beautiful women bathing at the thought of bathing. People with pure minds, such as Duque, who was known as the honest and reliable little husband, the pure and flawless Marcus, would never think of such things. It was like a guy who called Brother Chun a man all day long. Who would believe that Brother Chun was a real man? Wasn't that right? In any case, with such a clumsy Photoshop, it was obvious that it was fake. Normally, no one would believe it. Whoever believed it was mentally ill. Well, it just so happened that Nisario was mentally ill, so he believed it. The whispers of the ancient gods had long made him unable to distinguish between illusion and reality, and had driven him crazy. Therefore, he was sometimes cunning, sometimes crazy, and sometimes even he did not know what he was doing. At this moment, what appeared in Nisario's mind was his precious son, Nefarian, and precious daughter, Onyxia. The 2 dragon faces had turned into Shiba Inu faces. Dad woof woof woof. Nefarian wagged his tail. Dad woof woof woof. Onyxia used a Shiba Inu face that came with its own emoji pack to act cute. Then, Nisario had a mental breakdown. He, who thought that he had been cuckolded by a Shiba Inu, let out an extremely tragic cry. No, how could a dog sleep with my dragon queen? His voice spread everywhere. In a place far away from the battle, all the red dragons watching from afar were dumbfounded at the same time. The 4 dragon aspects immediately pounced on him, taking advantage of his weakness to kill him. Each dragon aspect used all 4 limbs and the claws on their wings, desperately tearing at the armor on the wings of death. 3 seconds. The wings of death was stunned for a full 3 seconds. When he came back to his senses, he immediately launched a fierce counterattack, but the 4 dragons quickly dodged like frightened sparrows. Nisario's hasty counterattack did not work. Izura, you're despicable. Nisario's well-founded counterattack left Izura completely speechless. Compared to you who betrayed the entire dragon race. This is nothing. Alexstrasza retorted righteously, even if it is despicable, it is only because Duque is despicable. It has nothing to do with Izura. The Red Dragon Queen decisively sold out Duque. Duque, who was watching from the sidelines, staggered and fell off his chair. What's going on? Spectators number 2, 3, and 4 were shocked. Alexstrasza, you're not kind. What if Nisario comes looking for trouble with me every day? Duque sent a magic message to the queen. Alexstrasza blushed. Well, her face was red to begin with, so there was nothing wrong with it. The queen immediately replied, Don't worry, Nisario will not live to see tomorrow's sun. Come on, he's of the earth element. If I hide underground, I won't be able to see him. Don't play word games with me. The others might not know, but Duque was very clear. In the original history, Nisario did not die until many years after the end of World War III. You make it sound like the 4 of us can't kill him. No, no, no. Your Majesty, regardless of whether there is a video or not, I have completely offended Deathwing in order to save you. I'm just a little mortal. Once he runs away, he will definitely hunt me down. I'm not afraid of 10,000, but just in case. Can you give me a promise? That thing, right? All right, I promise you, if we really fail, I'll make it happen. Phew! Duque let out a long sigh of relief and pretended that nothing had happened. He sat down again. No, my foot slipped. Who would believe you? Of course, None of them would expose Duque. Only Duque was secretly happy. That thing, if used well, was a real artifact. At this moment, the battle of the 5 dragons had resumed. Deathwing had fallen into a real disadvantage. The main reason was that the scene was too shocking to him. A huge opening that lasted for 3 seconds allowed the 4 dragons to peel off at least a dozen pieces of armor from his body. Blood, acid mist, lava, and all kinds of things splashed out from his open wounds. Now, it was not the 4 dragons defeating Deathwing, but Deathwing himself defeating himself. Bastard! Duke Marcus! I shouldn't have used your hand, I should have gotten rid of you from the beginning. Deathwing's roar in the common language resounded throughout the wilderness, and almost all the remaining humans and dwarves heard it. At this moment, Duque finally shivered. Facing the gazes of the 3, Duque straightened his back. That guy played dirty and I hit him back. That's all. Is that wrong? That's right. The 3 of them answered resolutely, but they sighed in their hearts. You even dared to play with Deathwing. Who else do you not dare to touch? Above, the 4 dragons continued to attack. Malygos laughed. You still want to take revenge on a little human? You should take care of your body first. Accompanied by laughter, the blue dragon attacked again. Obviously, the current Deathwing was different from before. After large pieces of armor were torn apart, Malygos' magic became the most powerful attack. The Blue Dragon King's magic could easily go through the Black Dragon's bloody wounds and directly hurt the Black Dragon's muscles and internal organs. Deathwing struggled pointlessly, trying to get rid of the other dragon's attacks while shouting, "Bastard, don't force me, or you'll regret it." Regret? On the contrary, I'll only regret it if I don't let you taste the pain I've suffered. The Red Dragon Queen did what she said. She began to bring the power of life into her attacks. The power of life that penetrated Deathwing's body aroused a greater reaction from the dark and chaotic power in his body, tearing his flesh even more violently. In the face of other attacks, even Isra's nightmare, Deathwing could still put up some resistance. But in the face of Alexstrasza's power of life, he could do nothing. Her attacks were accompanied by pain. Deathwing had never experienced the pain of his body being torn apart by a completely different power. The pain flared up in places where claws and fangs could not reach, biting deep in his life. This most terrifying dragon in the world suddenly let out a shrill cry that no one had ever heard before. Ow, 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 ow. This sound contained the power of the whispers of the ancient gods. This scream saved him. The other dragons were shocked by the cry and stopped their spells. Deathwing finally broke free from the encirclement and turned to escape. He flew away at a very fast speed. Although his whole body was still trembling and he was still screaming, he finally succeeded in quickly disappearing from sight. Chapter 530. Seeing the arrogant wings of death suddenly use the ultimate move Soaring Dragon Flash and actually run away with its tail between its legs, every dragon was dumbfounded. Nethario ran away just like that? What happened to the glory of the dragon race? What happened to the resistance to the end? This was not right. We can't let him escape. Nozdormu suddenly came to a realization. Give chase now? Malygos replied anxiously. Agreed, the Queen of Dreams said calmly. Isra looked at Alexstrasza, who was still circling. Even she was in disbelief at how she had torn the Black Dragon King apart. Sister? The Red Dragon replied. We have to chase him to the death. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. The Red Dragon Queen thought of Duque's jinx. If she could not deal with Nethario here, she would owe Duque a huge debt. The 4 dragon aspects flapped their wings at the same time and continuously sped up to chase the rebellious Black Dragon. It's gone. Gavin Rad, who was watching the show, looked at the empty sky in shock. I'm still researching how many Breaking Dawn spells each of their moves is equivalent to. Ronan was very professional. What a beautiful firework. Sasha was mischievous. There are more on the ground over there. Duque, who was even more mischievous, pointed at the tribal camp that had been burned to ashes in the distance. Yes, the 5 powerhouses were fighting in the sky, and hundreds of red dragons were cleaning the ground. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. So clean. More than 10 red dragons would descend side by side, like a plane scattering pesticides, covering the entire area. Under the accurately calculated dragon's breath, the scorching flames covered the entire orc camp, leaving nothing behind and no blind spots. When the extremely hot dragon's breath passed, there was not even a struggling man on fire. It was all charred black. Other than the orcs on the outermost periphery of the camp, not many orcs had the chance to escape. However, only the strongest orc clan could occupy the best territory. The flatter and more convenient the territory was, the more powerful the clan would occupy it. Whether it was territory or camp, this had been the rule since ancient times. The result was that almost all the second-tier clans were burned in this battle. Not many of the unranked clans in the periphery escaped. Seeing that there weren't many orcs, the furious red dragons didn't bother to use their dragon breath. They swooped down and picked up the orcs, throwing them high into the sky. Then the orcs screamed. Ugh. Some of the orcs just stood there, sweeping their dragon claws from the left and slapping their dragon wings from the right, killing the orcs like how humans would kill cockroaches. The spectators, who had moved their seats to the edge of the cliff at the top of the mountain, had a great time watching. Dude, that dragon looks like a newbie. The angle of its dive is terrible, and it can't really use up its dragon breath. Duque made a professional comment. At that moment, Sai-Dan Dathrahan and General Abendis arrived. Duque asked, "Where are Uther and Tyrion?" Sai-Dan was stunned for a moment, then she smiled. To be honest, among the first generation of paladins, only the 3 from Stormwind were close to Duque. These paladins from Lordaeron were only slightly closer to Duque than nodding acquaintances. But Sai-Dan was a friendly person. He didn't care about etiquette and shrugged. They're very responsible, unlike a certain deputy commander who slacks off after settling the big things. Sai-Dan's teasing of Duque made Gavin Rad's face turn red. The rest of the assault team was clearly still fighting the stubborn orcs in the passage of the fortress, but they were just spectators. It was a little unkind at the end of the day. Who knew that Duque would be so thick-skinned? Don't abuse the old. I'm old, and it's already amazing that I can complete the mission. I can't fight anymore. The world will belong to you young people in the future. The old man's tone caused the people around him to burst into laughter. But seeing Duque's appearance, Sai-Dan and Abendis couldn't laugh anymore. Most of his hair was white, and the skin on his arms was a little shriveled. When he smiled, his face was full of wrinkles. It was hard to imagine that Duque was actually just a 17-year-old young man. "Sir Marcus, your curse?" Abendis stopped halfway through his sentence. Duque smiled. "The Red Dragon Queen just lifted the curse for me." "You've worked hard, Your Excellency." Abendis bowed heavily. "Not only that, I'm also very grateful for your help at such a crucial time." Beside him, Sai-Dan bowed together. At this time, it wasn't just Abendis. Everyone present felt the same. Duque had really worked hard. The entire continent, the 10 countries, and the 3 major races added up to almost 10 million people. It was unbelievable that such a thin young man had to bear such a heavy burden. This was the fortune of the Alliance, but in a sense, it was also their tragedy. It was precisely because so many kings couldn't come to an agreement that the compromise that seemed so terrible before, but now seemed so wise, letting Anduin and Duque take power. Gavin Rad looked at the destroyed orc camp in the distance with hope in his eyes. If that's the case, maybe the war will end in a year. A year? Duque pursed his lips. The war will end with the Alliance's victory in 4 months. Everyone was shocked. Such a large-scale war between the Alliance and the Horde, and Duque actually said it would end in 4 months? Abendis was the most sensitive about the situation. 4 months? We don't know how many orc reinforcements there are on the other side of the dark portal. Your Excellency, isn't this too? Duque waved his hand. No, 4 months is already a conservative estimate. But it's good that everyone knows this. Don't spread it for now. As for the rest, I'll tell the kings at the throne meeting. At this moment, everyone's eyes were shining with excitement and ecstasy. If someone else had said it, they might have scoffed. But who was the one who said it? It was the deputy commander of the Alliance, the invincible and outstanding military strategist, and the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. From the first prediction of the Horde's attack on South Shore to the defense line at the South Stream coast, the Battle of the Hinterlands, the Battle of Cuel Salis, and the Battle of Lordaeron, Duke's military theory of killing the enemy is the most important, had led the Alliance from a disadvantage where all the kings had fallen to the Horde to a path of total victory. If his judgment was still wrong, who else in the Alliance could believe in the inference of the war situation? Really? Xianxia was overjoyed. Then what are we waiting for? Quickly go back and tell everyone this news. Big sis must be anxious. Duke's facial muscles twitched. I still have to wait for the Red Dragon Queen. I need her to help me recover the life I lost. Otherwise, how can I face people like this? Chapter 5:31. Duke had never been handsome. Compared to Lothar in the movie, he was much less handsome. But this didn't mean that Duke had to accept himself as an old man. Looking at the white-haired Khadgar in the movie, Duke was already pissed. Now that he had become himself, who could stand a transmigrator suddenly turning into an old man? Fortunately, he still had the Red Dragon Queen as a backup. Alexstrasza, who had bestowed the World Tree with life and the Night Elves with eternal life, could easily make up for his losses. However, Duke didn't expect Xianxia to suddenly say, "Don't worry. No matter what you become, I'll still like you." The group of single dogs around him all spat out. A group of people stared straight at Duke, as if they wanted to gouge out a piece of flesh from Duke's face. In public, Duke's behavior left people speechless. In private, wasn't it enough that he had Aurelia? He even went after his sister-in-law when most of his men were still single. Did he still have any humanity left? Fine, you're powerful. Go ahead and do it, but do you have to show off your love in front of us? Don't you know that showing off your love is faster? All of a sudden, the guys wanted to borrow flamethrowers from the FFF Guild to burn Duke too. Duke was dumbfounded. You don't have to do that even if you want to attract hatred. Will anyone protect me in the future? The innocent Xianxia blinked her eyes, as if she did not understand why the atmosphere had suddenly become so strange. Gavin Rad blinked. Boss, give me a piece of land in the Elven Forest. I'll forget about the trauma you caused me today. Duke quickly agreed. As for the other two singles, Saidan and Abendis, Duque promised to invite them to the Dream Angel Salon in Lordaeron for 3 days. What was a Dream Angel? Even though Saidan gave Duque, you know what I mean, look, a pure, holy, and upright person like Duque certainly wouldn't understand. Blarg. Well, I'm still a 17-year-old kid. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, Duque believed it himself. To Duque's surprise, the Red Dragon Queen did not appear even after he waited until nightfall. Who knew if they chased Nesario from the Eastern Kingdom all the way to Northrend in the north, then flew to the Kalimdor continent, then circled around Pantalia and completed the magnificent feat of flying around the world. Needless to say, the 5 silly guardian dragons with almost unlimited stamina and driven by their deep hatred might really be able to do it. With no other choice, Duque could only open the portal and return to the Dalajan first. What he didn't know was that the Dalajan, no, almost all the major cities in the Alliance's territory that received the latest news were in an uproar. The Alliance's deputy commander Duke Marcus has liberated the Red Dragon Queen from the evil orcs. 200,000 orcs under the Grimbader fortress in the wetlands have been killed by the Red Dragon's dragon breath. The Horde has suffered a crushing defeat and has begun to retreat from the earthy highlands. The Red Dragon army has become the humans' ally again. The Alliance has won. Cheering crowds could be seen everywhere. People were shouting, cheering, and roaring at the sky in ecstasy. Whose tears were flying? Whose smile was in full bloom? As long as one was wearing the Alliance's uniform, be it a 60-year-old uncle or a teenage boy, they would definitely be warmly welcomed by the people. There was an old man holding a collection of fine wine, a beautiful young lady who was as passionate as fire, and a smiling child. Everyone was praising the Alliance in their own way. However, this had nothing to do with Lordaeron. After sending out 1,000 people and 250 people, only 192 people returned alive, including those who had lost arms and legs and could no longer fight on the battlefield. The actual loss was more than 90%. It was no exaggeration to say that the elites of Lordaeron were almost burned to the ground. If they had paid such a huge sacrifice in exchange for an equivalent merit, King Terenas of Lordaeron might feel better. The point was, most of those who came back alive were the paladins of the Silver Hand. Fairness and honesty were the virtues. The paladins of the Supreme Creed. These guys would never lie. They would say to everyone they met, "We launched a surprise attack at the worst possible time. We encountered the main force of the Horde. If it wasn't for Sir Marcus's help, we would have been completely wiped out." And it was still Duque. It was as if as long as Duque was still alive, Lordaeron would not be able to rise again. Lordaeron had paid an unimaginably high price for this. More than 1,000 elite knights, mages, priests, hunters, and bandits had died. What did they get in exchange? A wrong time to launch a surprise attack. Terenas almost spat out a mouthful of blood. So the Lordaeron had paid such a heavy price in exchange for a successful, feint attack? If these 1,000 people were put on the battlefield, they would definitely be able to open up new territories. He died quietly in the fortress of Grimbator. It could be said that a general success was built on 10,000 bones. Damn it, Duque had become a general. Why did the people of Lordaeron have to be the 10,000 bones? When he heard the complete news, Terenas choked on his breath. He coughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes. He coughed so hard that he almost coughed his lungs out. He was bitter. He hated it. He used to hate the Horde that turned the Silverpine Forest into scorched earth. Now, he suddenly realized that he hated Duque even more, who always stole the limelight from Lordaeron. Before this, he had never imagined that there would be a day when he, the king of the strongest kingdom on the continent, would be jealous of a young man who once had nothing. At this moment, he even wanted to assassinate Duque. But he did not dare to do so. Duque, who had returned from hell, was already the #1 hero of the Alliance. And look at Stormwind's attitude. If he dared to touch Duque, Lang would definitely send out 200,000 troops to fight him. The kingdoms that were on good terms with Duque would definitely not sit back and watch. Terenas secretly gritted his teeth and swallowed his anger. On the other side, Stormwind held a grand welcome ceremony for Duque's return. Duque! Lang rushed up to Duque the moment he stepped out of the portal and gave Duque a bear hug. Cough, cough, cough. Let me go. Duque's face was pale. As soon as Lang let go, Anduin immediately followed up. Duque, cough, cough, cough. I'm dying. Duque's face was pale. Duque, what's wrong? Duke Bolvar wanted to take the third hit, but he was shocked to find that Duque was almost dead. It was a mess. Chapter 5:32. Only those who had almost lost it would cherish it. It was precisely because Lang thought that he was about to lose Duque, his most staunch and powerful supporter since the destruction of the Storm Kingdom, that Lang's mood fell into the abyss. Now, don't be fooled by Duke's pitiful appearance. Under the premise that Duke's life wasn't in danger, Duke's pitiful appearance was just a bit of entertainment. The haze of the nightmare had dissipated. A brilliant future was in front of him. How could Lang not cry with joy? That's right. King Lang's eyes were red and moist. Countless pairs of eyes were focused on Duque, who was teasing the king and his ministers. General Tom Seamus looked at Duque, took a deep breath, and roared in a loud and majestic voice. To the hero of the Alliance, the Grand Duke of Stormwind, His Excellency Duke Marcus. 3,000 Stormwind soldiers, in a uniform movement, followed General Seamus, drew their swords out of their sheaths, raised their hands to the sky, and saluted Duque in unison. At this moment, the sword light was like a forest, swallowing mountains and rivers. To His Excellency Marcus. The domineering shout echoed throughout the Dalajan city. These soldiers were not just guards of honor. They came from all over Stormwind, from the most elite Griffin Legion, to the local garrison, to the militia with minimal military training, and even to the refugees who came to South Shore with the refugee fleet. But now, they all had a unified name, Stormwind Elite Soldiers. Each of their hands was stained with the blood of at least 5 orc warriors. They were not only the elites of Stormwind, but also first-class soldiers in the entire alliance. Strong, firm, with combat skills and iron discipline. However, it was such a soldier that everyone's voice carried a sense of worship. Although Duque had long since stopped directly commanding the army of Stormwind, and even the private corps he led alone reached as many as 30,000 people, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was the king's subordinate, but the mention of the name Duke Marcus still made people in awe. To the people of Storm, it was he who subdued the Bloodsail fleet and saved 600,000 civilians from certain death under the noses of hundreds of thousands of orcs. It was him who brought life-saving food to the 600,000 starving refugees and opened up countless wastelands in the Hillsbrad Hills so that the people could live a peaceful life. To the Storm soldiers, the burning of Stormwind City, the ambush at Barradine Bay, the first and second defense of South Shore, the battle of the Hinterlands, the defense of Lordaeron, and the battle to save the Red Dragon Queen. Duque's name was equal to the glory of a warrior, equal to a miracle. He was synonymous with the god of war. Such a legendary figure was only 17 years old. Looking at Duque's white hair, looking at the wrinkles on Duque's hand that looked like an old man's, thinking of the curse he had received, thinking of the suffering he had to endure for this destroyed kingdom, every soldier's eyes were as red as King Lang's. A sea appeared in front of Duque. It was a sea constructed by the gleam of swords. The sharp swords were raised at a 45-degree angle. As Lang, Anduin, and Duque moved forward, they suddenly parted one by one. It was like the miracles of a sword parting the sea in a legend. The sea parted. At the end of the sea, the king and his 2 ministers sat in an open carriage and slowly set off towards the Violet Square in the center of the Dalajan Kingdom. Although the sky was dark, cheers could be heard on both sides of the road. Countless Dalajan people, mage apprentices and mages crowded on both sides of the road, trying to see the glory of the #1 legendary mage in the alliance. If it was anyone else, even if he was a king, the Dalajan mages would not be so revered. This was an era where the spirit of chivalry was the most revered. Looking at the 7 human kingdoms, except for the Dalajan, no king was a mage. In most human settlements, only the general who led the army to charge would be recognized as a true hero. Mages, on the other hand, were just mysterious people who hid in the protection of the army and released sinister magic. In a sense, it was precisely because of the prejudice of the majority that Duque, a mage hero, was even more precious. Duque was the Grand Duke of Stormwind, but was that important? Didn't they see that even the Prince of Kuel Salis was mingling in the Dalajan? As long as he was a hero in the field of magic, he would naturally be warmly welcomed by the Dalajan people. In their opinion, Duque, who had once lectured in the Dalajan, was undoubtedly a member of the Dalajan. Duque! The uniform shouts were like a tsunami, rising and falling one after another. The scene and atmosphere made King Lang, who sat opposite Duque, and Anduin, who sat beside Duque, become foils. Of course, neither of them cared. They just smiled at Duque. Duque gently waved his right hand while his left raised the marshal's combat staff from Antonidas. Even after the direct attack of the Wings of Death's shadow flames and such a violent explosion, there was not a single scratch left on it. The staff was still shining with silver light. The head of a winged horse was carved on the staff, emitting a faint silver light. It looked extremely holy and beautiful. When Duque raised the shining staff made by the Dalajan, the crowd's cheers reached its peak. In the square, the representatives of the 9 countries of the Alliance, except for Stormwind, had already gathered. Looking at Duque, every king and every representative had a complicated feeling. They did not expect Duque to do it. With his almost dead body, he led a small team of 5 and penetrated thousands of miles behind enemy lines. He sneaked into the heavily guarded Grim Battle Fortress while the Red Dragon patrolled in the sky and the Beastmen roamed the wetlands. He cleverly used the Wings of Death's plot to complete the feat of liberating the Red Dragon Queen. If Duque could be said to be a wise man and a commander who only knew how to command, the current Duque was like a real hero who had been quenched in a furnace. After a real test, he was reborn and became a real hero of the Alliance. His reputation as a hero had been completely established. No matter what happened to Duque in the future, he would become an indelible legend in the history of the Alliance. No matter how much the king of Tarinas secretly mocked Duque, he had to put on a smile and welcome Duque. However, an accident that no one could have imagined happened at this moment. An abrupt voice suddenly rang out in front of the drum music. Duque, you have become a hero. You also told us that the Red Dragon Legion is no longer a part of the tribe. So, I want to ask you, who should I look for to avenge my son's death? If it was some blind pawn, perhaps he would have been dragged out and killed by the angry soldiers after saying this. But the person who said this was King Kurtira's, Dalen Proudmoore. Chapter 5:33. As soon as these words came out, the entire place went silent. Everyone could understand the anger of a father who had lost his son. Everyone could understand the sadness of a king who had lost his heir. Since ancient times, it had always been a sad thing for a white-haired person to send off a black-haired person. But this was the Alliance Conference. Honoring Duque, the hero of the Alliance, was the most important ceremony to show the might of the Alliance after all the suffering he had brought to the Horde. Look, even though the Rotterdam Kingdom had suffered the worst loss, Tarinas still stood there with a look of pride on his face. What's more, this was the Crimson Dragon Army, which had extraordinary power. If the Queen was angry, the entire human race would be destroyed, and all the major human cities would cease to exist. Humans would once again split into countless small clans, and return to the position of being at the mercy of others 3,000 years ago. In the end, the Crimson Dragon Army was being threatened, and there were not so many ancient red dragons coming out to harm the Alliance. Otherwise, the Alliance would have been destroyed. Now that you, a mere King Cultiras, have caused a ruckus at this time, who would want to please you? Who would dare to support you? Silence. Deathly silence. In fact, Dalen knew that he would not be supported by any country. He also knew that he should be like Tarinas and swallow his anger. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. As soon as he closed his eyes, he saw his eldest son, Drake, being burned to ashes by the raging flames. His son's soul haunted his soul. He could not swallow this, not as a father, but as a king. Even though he knew that it was not the right time to say it, he felt that if he did not say it today, he would never have the courage to say it again. He would not have the right to be a father. The air was freezing. The temperature was dropping. Dalen's eyes were filled with tears as he knelt on the cold floor. Perhaps this was a plea, or perhaps it was a form of self-repentance. In any case, he ignored everyone's gaze and disrupted the festive atmosphere. He knelt there. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. A figure wearing a mage robe. Other than Antonidas, there was only one person who had the right to wear a mage robe and stand in front of him, Duque. In his heart, Duque was the man who had sacrificed the lives of millions to become a hero. Sigh. Duque patted Dalen's shoulder and said something that not only Dalen, but all the other kings did not dare to believe. Dalen, get up. I'll get Alexstrasza to give you an explanation. What? To make the Red Dragon Queen, one of the world's 5 dragon aspects, give an explanation to the king of a mere human kingdom? What kind of joke was this? It was like asking a lion to apologize to the ant's relatives for accidentally stepping on it and then asking the lion to apologize to the ant's relatives. Since ancient times, who wouldn't admit that they were unlucky to encounter such an extraordinary existence? It was one thing for Lin to go crazy. Duque was going to join him in his madness? What if they infuriated the Crimson Dragon Army and caused these abnormal lizards to stand against humans again? Anyone who could become a king was no longer a brute. At this moment, almost all the kings were going crazy. Antonidas could clearly sense that Duque had already sent out a magic message. Wait for 10 minutes. The Crimson Dragon race will give the Alliance an explanation. An explanation? There really was one. Since ancient times, anyone who slayed a dragon would definitely be regarded as a hero by the entire human world. Only the truly high-ranking people knew that those who were slain were lone dragons. They were either banished by the dragons for committing a crime, or they were the descendants of the black dragon that the four-colored dragons did not like. Now, all the kings and representatives were dumbfounded. They stared at the sky blankly. King Dalin looked at Duque in disbelief. After making sure that Duque's face did not show any signs of lying, he stood up with his sword. Facing the night wind, he stared at the pitch-black sky quietly. 10 minutes. Usually, it would be over in a moment. Unfortunately, the oppressive atmosphere made the passage of time extremely slow. Everyone's forehead was dripping with sweat. Everyone was quietly waiting for their judgment, waiting for the one that might appear in the sky. Around 9 minutes later, the moonlight suddenly dimmed. The bright moonlight was blocked by a huge creature. As expected, it was a dragon. It spread its wings, and its scales shone with a dazzling red light. The huge golden vertical pupils seemed to be flowing with blazing lava. The two pairs of fiery horns on his high head were raised high, looking down at the monarchs in the violet square from high above. Compared to this terrifying creature that came from the ancient times more than 10,000 years ago, the armies of the mortal world, status, and power all seemed insignificant. When the dragon soared in the clouds, humans were just ants crawling on the ground. The sky was their domain, and they ruled over the sky. Even though it was easy for different races to have facial blindness, after many days of fighting, every alliance had recognized every single characteristic of this most ferocious ancient dragon. There was no mistake. He was Tyrannes, the one who had sent over 10,000 alliance soldiers into the Sea of Fire. Every alliance soldier nervously clenched their weapons. The higher-ups had indeed announced that the Red Dragon army was no longer an enemy, but who knew if this ferocious lizard would suddenly go berserk? The Dalajan's magic defense system could indeed destroy him, but before this behemoth crashed to the ground, how many people would be killed by him? No one was sure. However, under the watchful eyes of more than 100,000 people, Tyrannes, who had just landed on the specially empty space in Violet Square, suddenly began to shrink. A dragon that could easily weigh more than 1,000 tons became the size of a human. No matter how many times Duque saw this situation, he still felt that it was magical. It was full of all kinds of unscientific things. Of course, pursuing science in a magical world was not a reliable thing to begin with. What appeared in front of the kings was an old man with long white hair, a white beard, and white eyebrows. He was not wearing a piece of armor, only a Greek-like cloth skirt around his waist. His upper body was bare, revealing a strong but full of scars. Who is it? The one who claims to want the ancient dragon Tyrannes to give him an explanation? Don't make it easy for me to find you. Come out yourself. The humanoid dragon released a fierce aura, with a dragon's roar that made countless people tremble. Chapter 5:34. On the square, the morale of the Dalajan and Gilnea's soldiers was low. The sound of their metal leg guards retreating was piercing to the ears. At close range, the kings who were suffering from the dragon's wrath did not fare as well. Each of them made a fool of themselves, but Tyrannes was undoubtedly the worst. Tyrannes, who only had a combat level of 5, was frightened by the dragon's wrath. He took 3 steps back and collapsed on his throne. Of course, the other kings either took half a step back or knelt on one knee. Even Lang sighed and took a step back. He did not look at Tyrannistas in the eye. Only Dalin Proudmoore held onto his scimitar and gritted his teeth. Even though his legs were shaking, even though the veins on his neck were bulging, even though the veins on the back of his hands were bulging like a dragon's beard, he persevered and faced the terrifying golden pupils of the ancient red dragon without fear. Dalin suddenly took a step forward and raised his scimitar at the dragon. "It's me, Dalin Proudmoore of the Kingdom of Cultivate. This has nothing to do with the Alliance, and it has nothing to do with my kingdom. As a father, I seek justice for my son, Drake Proudmoore, who died under your flames." Dalin was going all out. He was going all out. Of course, he hated the culprit's tribe. However, he was also unable to accept the fact that the murderer who had just killed his son yesterday was now standing beside him as an ally of the Red Dragon Alliance. Then, he would have to suck up to these powerful allies and pretend that nothing had happened to fight alongside the Red Dragon. Of course, he could not forgive himself for causing the entire kingdom of Cultiras to be engulfed by the dragon's flames because of a personal grudge. So, as a father who had lost his son, he challenged Tyrannistus. What kind of justice do you want? The dragon's tone was full of disdain. A duel? Dalen's voice was powerful. He raised his scimitar and took another step forward. His bloodshot eyes stared at the dragon. Haha. The giant dragon's laughter shocked everyone in the square. You! Everyone felt as if a boulder was pressing down on their chests under the terrifying dragon's might, making it hard for them to breathe. Lin, who had endured the greatest pressure, was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. No one knew whether it was because of the shock or because he had bitten his lips. That's just me. A tiny human in the eyes of a giant dragon. I know I can't beat you, but I demand a duel at least. This is my last honor as a father. Almost as soon as Lin finished speaking, an anxious voice came from outside. No, father, don't do anything stupid. Dalen's expression changed. He knew who the voice belonged to, then Reed Proudmoore, Dalen's second son, the de facto crown prince of Cultira's kingdom. At that moment, Dalen saw a streak of gold in his peripheral vision. It was his lover, Gina Goldsword. Dalen knew that she had broken the taboo and used the teleportation gate to summon Then Reed to stop him from doing anything stupid. If Then Reed was affected by the dragon's anger, there would be no male heir in Cultira's kingdom. Gina Goldsword's actions hit Dalen's weak spot. Dalen's facial muscles were twitching. Various thoughts were fighting in his mind. The humanoid dragon sneered. That's right. You have no chance of winning a duel with a giant dragon. Go back and look after your children. I can't guarantee that your family won't be affected during the duel. You know that it's hard to control dragon breath once it's released. At that moment, Dalen's expression turned cold. He suddenly shouted, Someone stop Then Reed. I, Dalen Proudmoore, will be eternally grateful to him. The gratitude of someone who was about to die? At the same time, his descendants would hate him for eternity? Was there really someone willing to do such a stupid deal? Don't be surprised. Someone really did. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew. A huge ice wall that was 3 meters tall, 20 meters wide, and half a meter thick appeared in front of Then Reed and Gina. The one who made the move was actually Dooku. Dalen wasn't the only one who was shocked. All the other kings were shocked. Dooku used his other hand to stop Sasha, who seemed to want to do something. He looked at Dalen calmly. You wanted me to help you get an explanation from the Red Dragon Army, and I did. You wanted me to stop the next king of Cultiras, and I did. You owe me 2 favors. 2 favors? Do dead people need to repay favors? Dalen suddenly smiled. There were tears in his smile, and there was also a hint of desolation. From today onwards, Dooku, you are my brother. Without saying anything else, Dalen ignored his son and lover's pleas. He walked forward and threw away his scabbard and armor. This heroic man who had traversed the seas for 20 years, just like that, bare-chested, proudly walked towards the opponent he would normally never be able to defeat. Ha! My chest is here. Do you dare stab me here? Tyrannistus laughed haughtily, slapping his broad, muscular chest. There was no sound. Dalen used his scimitar to give his answer as a father. He suddenly lunged forward, lowered his wrist, and stabbed forward. The scimitar was best at slashing, but that didn't mean that the sharp tip was just for show. Dalen's thrust was the limit of a human warrior. He turned into a stream of light, and he and the scimitar became one as he stabbed toward Tyrannis. This was the most perfect stab Dalen had made since he entered the realm of heroes. Perhaps to the dragon's horrifying dynamic vision, this stab was like slow motion, not worth mentioning. Perhaps after this stab, he would be tortured to death by the human-shaped dragon in any way. However, he didn't care. He got rid of all distracting thoughts. He only wanted justice for that stab. The millions of people present couldn't bear to watch anymore. A few kings secretly closed their eyes. Only Dooku calmly watched all of this with a slightly sorrowful expression. Time seemed to freeze. There was no lightning-fast counterattack. There was no bloody and cruel killing. When he clearly felt the scimitar stabbing into flesh, Lin was stunned. The audience was so shocked that they couldn't speak. This was because Lin's epic scimitar, which was far from being able to slay a dragon, had slashed horizontally, and the sharp tip of the scimitar pierced through the gap between two ribs on the human-shaped tyranny's left chest. The scimitar pierced the human-shaped dragon's heart in half. How is this possible? Chapter 5:35. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and confusion. Tyranny's extremely weak but clear voice could be heard. Don't be shocked. In some ways I feel the same way as you. For my beloved queen, I'm willing to give up everything. For her to suffer less, I'm willing to blind my own conscience and sully my own soul. I'm willing to kill humans for the filthy orcs. So, this is my atonement. Dalen's hand went limp without him realizing it. He held the humanoid red dragon that was about to fall, feeling a little lost. This is the red dragon race's answer to you, to humans, and to the entire alliance. I wonder, are you satisfied now? He wanted to say yes, but when the words came to his mouth, Dalen's mouth was filled with bitterness. He could not say it no matter what. Don't be shocked. You earned this yourself. If you're just a coward, I'll tear you apart in one bite. Tyrannies, have ruled this world for 10,000 years. I will not die in the hands of a piece of trash. Even though Dalen could clearly feel the dragon's life slipping away, the dragon's voice was still very clear. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The red dragon's arrogance was ingrained in their bones. Ordinary people, no matter how high their status was or how good their reasons were, had no right to demand justice from the Red Dragon army. As expected, only heroes had the right to be acknowledged by the dragons. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but respect Lin. Tyrannies was still speaking. I know that I've sinned greatly. So, after I die, you can do whatever you want with my body as compensation to you and the entire alliance. However, this is all the compensation from the Red Dragon army. Suddenly, the humanoid Terranistas pushed Dalen away. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, his body began to grow rapidly. In less than 3 seconds, he turned back into the dragon that was dozens of meters long. However, unlike the mighty and domineering aura from before, this time, this giant dragon finally began to walk towards the end of its life. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. When the huge body of the dragon was no longer moving, everyone could confirm that the terrible dragon that had been wreaking havoc in the earthy highlands and the Hillsbrad area for months, and even destroyed the entire king's city of Riptide Castle, had finally made up for the sins it had committed. Suddenly, someone started applauding. It was Duque. He applauded his brave father, who knew that he was no match for the dragon, but still dared to challenge it alone. Clap, clap. The clear and unique applause attracted everyone's attention. Clap, clap, clap. More people started clapping. Pa 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 pa. They were the elite soldiers of the various countries who were still in the plaza. They were slapping their swords against their shields. They were saluting Lin in a warrior's way. However, the winner of this slightly special dragon-slaying battle was sitting paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. Everyone could see the cold sweat glistening on his back. Gina and Tanreed hurried over to help Lin up. King Dalen didn't go back to rest. Instead, he insisted on coming to Duque. Thank you, Brother Duque. The hero of the Seven Seas smiled sincerely. Even after this battle is over, you must come to Cultivate more often. Of course. Duque smiled. Dalen glanced at Lang, who was beside Duque, and whispered to Lang, if Lang or William don't treat you well, you can come to Cultivate. You can choose between a prince or a duke. Lang pretended to be angry. On the other side, a triumphant ceremony that had been specially prepared for Duque had been disrupted by Lin. In less than 10 minutes, the ceremony was dismissed hastily. Of course, some people were unhappy about this incident. Some politicians even secretly cursed Lin, saying that Lin had wiped out the cooperation between the Crimson Dragon Army and the Alliance, or more accurately, the Crimson Dragon Army and the humans. Afterwards, in the state guest house, Lang also asked Duque about the Crimson Dragon army. Duque pondered for a while, and decided to reveal the truth to Lang and Andoin. I didn't expect Tyrannes to do that. That's an ancient Crimson Dragon. Will the Crimson Dragon army really not mind a powerhouse second only to the Queen? It's all right, because Tyrannes was about to die anyway. Huh? Lang and Andoin were shocked at the same time. Isn't the life of a dragon unlimited? Andoin asked in bewilderment. However, even the life-giver can't deal with the torture of the disease. Tyrannes has been suffering from the disease for many years. This is no secret among the dragons. His vitality has been weakening, and he has only lived for so long because of Alexstrasza's support. Duque sighed. Lang asked, then did he do so much for the Queen purely to repay her kindness? And in order to heal the enmity between the Crimson Dragon army and the Alliance, he deliberately sacrificed himself? Duque smiled bitterly. I can't answer that question. But I think the window of cooperation with the Crimson Dragon army is not completely closed. Andoin immediately perked up. You're saying that the Alliance can form a legion of Dragon Knights? The Orcs' Dragon Knights really made the Alliance suffer. Even with the support of the Wildhammer dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Alliance actually lost more than they won. After all, the limit of the Griffins' talent was there. Compared to the Wunts, they were far inferior. Duque smiled slyly. It's Stormwind that has the opportunity to form a legion of Dragon Knights. This sentence really made Lang and Andoin laugh uncontrollably. Okay, the last question. Duque, how do you solve the problem? That's my personal secret. Duque smiled mysteriously. After sending off the two leaders of Stormwind, Duque suddenly found a red-haired beauty holding a large bottle of wine on his windowsill while taking a shower. The iconic fiery red bikini armor with gold-rimmed edges and the tall dragon horns on her head all spoke of the owner's identity, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Gazing at the bright moon, the queen murmured softly, I realize that human wine can sometimes be a good thing. At least it can numb my nerves when I don't want to think about things. Duque smiled faintly. Don't joke around. This bit of wine can't numb your nerves. If I force my vitality down to 1/10,000th, then it'll be fine. The queen looked back with a sad expression. She seemed to want to cry, but couldn't. I've been living in the wilderness, enduring the cold and wind. I've been hunted by giant dragons in the sky, and I've been hiding from orcs on the ground. I've even had to play a mental game with Nesario. It's all worth it. Demon Soul. No, according to the system's prompt, this should be called Wrath of the Dragon. As Duque expected, the 4 dragon aspects failed to kill Nesario. The cunning Deathwing did not forget his instincts as an earth dragon. Under the joint pursuit of the 4 great dragons, he actually plunged headfirst into a huge volcano crater, desperately drilling into the high-temperature lava underground. Among the 4 dragons, Alexstrasza and Nozdormu could barely catch up. However, Isra and Maligos could not. 2 against 1, and fighting in the earth and lava that Nesario was familiar with, the 2 of them had no chance of winning, so they could only give up. In return for Duque's efforts in facilitating this incident, the 4 dragon aspects agreed to purify and transform the remaining demon soul into an amulet specifically for the Black Dragon race. The system prompt was as follows. Demi-artifact, Wrath of the Dragon. This is a targeted demi-artifact modified by the 4 dragon aspects, excluding the Earth Dragon, Nesario. The original prototype of this demi-artifact was the Soul of the Dragon, that once shocked the universe and destroyed the entire Burning Legion fleet in one blow. After several modifications, with most of its functions lost, it was transformed into a special demi-artifact for Duke Marcus. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 1. Crisis Perception. Since there are 2 Black Dragon King scales in the Demigod artifact that contain 12% of the Deathwing, Nesario's soul, when Nesario appears within 5,000 meters of the host will automatically sense the distance, direction, and form of Nesario. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 2, Soul Punishment. Activating the divine power infused by the 4 dragon aspects can launch a mental attack that directly targets Nsario's soul. The attack time is up to 5 minutes, and during the special effect period, Nsario's combat power will drop by about 30%. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 3, Black Dragon Torment. As Nsario is the king of the black dragons, he is the ancestor of all black dragons. Activating this special effect can directly torture the soul of any black dragon descendant. The closer the distance, the purer the bloodline, and the greater the power. After reading these instructions, Duque was so elated that he wanted to hold Alexstrasza's face and kiss her a few times. He did not expect that she would come to him before he could even kiss her. Hey, it's time to replenish the life force that you've lost. I can't stand the sight of an old man like you. Let's talk about it. Why do you have to take off my shirt? Duque was shocked. However, he could not resist. She even wanted to drink the dragon's power potion to make herself extremely strong. This fellow did not need to drink any potions at all, because the fellow in front of him, who looked like a red-haired beauty, was actually a red dragon. To his dismay, Duque found himself stretched out on the bed. Then, the queen merely leaned over his chest and licked him a few times, and he actually returned to his 17-year-old appearance, a handsome young man with short black hair. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. This was because the queen's hands were like iron pincers that gripped Duque's wrists. Well, in terms of strength, Duque was completely outclassed. The queen hiccuped. Now it seems that you're quite handsome too. Not knowing what the queen was up to, Duque feigned civility. Yes, although my classmates don't admit it, my mother always says that I'm handsome. I'm sleepy. The queen yawned. For some reason, this action of hers was very feminine. Well, there's a strange feeling. Chapter 537. Duque's head was full of question marks. Was this the rhythm of welfare? He felt that something was wrong. The queen's voice became extremely soft, almost moaning. I feel like my body is floating. There seems to be something pushing against my throat. Could it be that because I just lost an admirer, there's an empty space in my heart? Am I like the bad women in human novels, who fall in love with someone else immediately after the death of their lover? What kind of nonsense novels are you reading? Even in danger, Duque could not help but complain about this kind of trashy female novel that misled people. No, misled someone who might be the most terrifying existence in the world. Alexstrasza raised her head. Her golden eyes were filled with a haze of confusion. The queen seemed to be a little confused. Revelation of the Holy Light. Duque cursed. T. How could Revelation of the Holy Light have such a vulgar story? Do you believe that I will fight the Archbishop of the Holy Light to the death? Alright, I was just saying. Alonso's couldn't beat you even if he gathered the entire church. The queen burped again. She tried hard to remember. Well, I remember there was another cover under that one. I think it was The Unspeakable Story of the Duchess and the Coachman? F***CK. So it's changing the cover. Countless seniors played with it when I was in university. They bought an English-Chinese dictionary or something for the phone. At this moment, Duque wanted to strangle all the female authors in the world of Azeroth. But it was obvious that the queen was delirious and was running on the road of no return. I can't take it anymore. The queen's face was flushed. There's a warm current in my body. There was another moan, and Duque's hair stood on end. Wait, don't tell me that's... Duke's face turned pale as he thought of something terrible. Normally, no man could resist such a situation. But the queen was still saying, could it be that my qualities as a female are awakening? However, Duque was not an ordinary man. He had the intelligence of an ordinary man. At this moment, Duque was sweating profusely. He had already figured out what the queen's so-called heat flow was. He struggled with all his might, but a few seconds later, he was horrified to find that he was like a frog nailed to the operating table waiting to be dissected. Under the queen's tremendous strength, he really couldn't move. Please, Wake up, Alexstrasza. Your Majesty the Queen. Only that was out of the question. Don't. Duque's tears flowed out. Could this be my love? Could this be the affection in my heart that is even more passionate than the dragon's breath? Can I tell you how much I love you? The Queen's speech was incoherent. Just by looking at her delicate and alluring face, it was absolutely mesmerizing. However, Duke knew what was going to happen next. No. Yamit. Let go of me. Duque lost his composure and screamed. No, it's too late. I'm coming out. Duque, stop struggling. Ugh. At this moment, Duque thought of the collapse of the mountains and rivers. At this moment, Duque thought of a broken dam. At this moment, Duque struggled to use magic to resist the Queen's vomit caused by too much alcohol. However, Duque failed. Low-density elements would definitely be repelled and dispersed by high-density elements. In front of the Red Dragon Queen, Duque's pitiful frost elements were completely repelled. As a result, a large pile of sour and smelly vomit was poured onto Duque's chest. Then, the Queen who had done such a shocking and insane evil thing actually fell asleep. He fell asleep. Asleep. Help. It's fine if you're asleep, but don't sleep there. And don't use dragon breath. Outside the door, the responsible Gavin Rad seemed to have heard Duque's panic-filled pleas for help again and finally couldn't help but rush in. In the next second, this unreliable paladin was dumbfounded. What did he see? From his angle, the beautiful Red Dragon Queen's head was resting on Duque's thigh as if she was doing something shameful. The problem was that the Queen's butt was still stuck up high. Even though she still had her pants down, it was an eyesore. Sorry to disturb you. Gavin Rad immediately pulled his head back, wondering if he would be silenced or something. No, it's not what you think. Help me. Before Duque could finish, he saw the door close in despair. *CK. Looking at the fire element that seemed to have a mind of its own, following the breath of the sleeping Queen and hovering less than 2 centimeters above his dick, the horror on Duque's face froze. Help, someone save me. There's really nothing going on between me and Alexstrasza. The priest of Azeroth had a skill called Prayer of Despair. Duque didn't believe in the holy light, but it seemed that his bad luck was finally over. A familiar silver-haired figure suddenly appeared on the windowsill. For a moment, the beautiful female figure seemed to scold him in disdain. She wanted to turn around and leave, but the sour smell in the wind attracted her attention. Duque? Sasha asked tentatively. Help me. Duque seemed to have found a life-saving straw. He really wanted to cry. Looking at Duque's face, which was uglier than if he had been tortured but had regained its youthfulness, Sasha couldn't help but burst into laughter. After the initial shock, she finally understood the situation. She put her hands on her hips, not sure if she was angry or amused. It looked like a passionate affair, but it was actually Duque being tortured by the most powerful female dragon in the world in a drunken rage. It was a pitiful and helpless matter. All right, I got it. Sasha really didn't have any good ideas to deal with a dragon. She tried to see if she could loosen Alexstrasza's claws, but she realized that even in human form, the strength of a dragon was not just for show. Sasha was also surprised that the Queen didn't crush Duque's arms and legs like twigs. Ugh, if you can't loosen her, at least help me wipe that thing off my chest. Stinks. Duque said bitterly. Wait, I have another idea. If she really lowers her spirit and vitality, we can try. What Sasha wanted to do was the druid's pacify. Most of the skills of a ranger lean towards hunters, but as the king of the forest, the nature-loving ranger also had many druid skills. Pacify made animals less angry and dispelled the enraged effect. Miraculously, the Queen actually loosened her tight grip, and Duque was able to break free. Chapter 5:38. Cough cough. I'm saved. Duque struggled to crawl out. Then he saw Sasha, who was trying to pretend that she didn't mind, but she was pinching her nose and looking at him as if he were a dirty thing. As for the culprit, the Red Dragon Queen, She curled up into a ball like a cat and fell into a deep sleep. *CK. He couldn't hit her, and there was no point in cursing her. With Sasha watching from the side, Duque could only blame his bad luck. Alright, I'll go take a shower now. Alright? At this moment, Duque, who felt that his life had turned gloomy, rolled to the bathroom in resignation. There was no running water in this world. It was good enough to have 2 tubs of clean water in the bathroom. Fortunately, it was still hot. If it were winter, a bucket of ice water would be poured over his head. Just thinking about it would make him want to die. Not having a shower head wasn't a problem for Duque. Duque was quite good at controlling the water element. Now that he was far away from the drunkard who was covered in flames, the operation of the magic circuit became normal. Sitting in the bathtub, Duque agilely manipulated a column of water to rise from the bucket and poured it evenly on his body. On the other side, Sasha looked at Alexstrasza, who was sleeping soundly on Duque's bed. She didn't like it at all. She couldn't care less. She opened Duque's door and saw Gavin Rad and Vanessa staring at her with their mouths wide open. Gavin Rad's mouth was wide open. This isn't right. Wasn't Boss fighting with the Red Dragon Queen just now? Why is it Aurelia's sister now? Boss is so mighty. Sasha snorted coldly, scaring Gavin Rad, who was obviously thinking the wrong thing. Her Majesty Alexstrasza is drunk inside and has fallen asleep. Please help carry Her Majesty to the guest room. The 2 guys outside had the word embarrassed written all over their faces, but who asked one of them to be a bodyguard and the other a maid? After a while, the queen was carried away and the bed was changed into clean sheets. When Sasha returned to Duque's room, she was surprised to find that the room still had a rancid smell. After using the power of the wind to disperse it, there was still a little smell. Sasha realized that the smell came from the bathroom. Duque was still washing. There was no shampoo or soap in the world of Azeroth. There was only the simplest form of washing. But that smell. Recalling Sasha's pretentious but disgusted expression, Duque just wanted to scream for help. Suddenly, Duque, whose back was facing the bathroom door, heard the sound of the door opening. The next second, a few soft fingers gently wiped the back of Duque's ears. There's still something dirty here. The one who spoke was naturally Sasha. Duque couldn't stay calm anymore. Although Duque knew that Sasha was a wife-like character in history, he had never thought that Sasha would actually come to help him bathe. Duque's body immediately stiffened. He could only let Sasha do whatever she wanted. Don't think that I want to help you bathe. You're a big shot now. I don't want to walk out and see the great hero of the Alliance being despised by others because of the rancid smell on him. That was a reason too? Alright, when a girl didn't want to do things for a guy, perhaps she could find 10,000 reasons. Of course, when she wanted to do it, she only needed one reason. She was willing. Duque felt as if he had been hit by Nozdormu's time magic. His thoughts became sluggish. Sasha didn't say much. She just squatted outside the bathtub and carefully wiped Duque's upper and back half of his body that had the rancid smell. This scene wasn't erotic at all. Instead, there was a hint of ambiguity. Something felt wrong. Isn't this what lovers do when they're already at home? Duque's brain felt like it was filled with paste. Here, turn around. Duque turned around in a daze. Sasha's face was red. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't hold it in anymore, but she focused all her attention elsewhere. Actually, we still have to thank Her Majesty. She was actually able to help you recover from such a serious life-draining curse. Look at your arm. It was all dried skin before. After Duque was cursed, Sasha counted and examined all the changes in his body as if she was counting her family's treasures. There were many places that even Duque didn't notice, but Sasha did. If Illyria was the epitome of a heroine, Sasha, who was equally famous, was more like a gentle wife. It was already very fortunate to have such a famous heroine. Who would have thought that he'd even offend Sasha? Just then, Sasha revealed a very satisfied smile. Alright, the examination is complete. All the filth is gone. Your body has also recovered perfectly. There was a saying that went, a glance back and a smile can charm 100 people. This time, Sasha gave Duque a pure and beautiful smile. It was like an electric shock that struck the softest part of Duque's heart. The most beautiful thing about a smile wasn't its appearance, but the beauty that came from the heart. Even an idiot could feel that Sasha was worried for his body, and was glad that his body had recovered. This kind of prayer that came from the purest of emotions immediately broke through the last barrier in Duque's heart. Sasha. At first, Sasha thought that she would get a thank you from him. Unexpectedly, Duque caressed her face gently, and then leaned his upper body forward to bring his face closer. Sasha's body trembled, and then she slowly closed her eyes, waiting for the kiss with the most blissful expression. That's right. This wasn't the first time they kissed. But thinking back, she had always been forceful. Duque didn't reject her, or perhaps he didn't have the time to reject her. This was the first time Duque took the initiative to kiss her. The meaning behind this was a huge leap in their relationship in various senses. Duque's lips were a little clumsy, but Sasha didn't dislike this feeling. From a light touch to a passionate response and entanglement, the temperature in the bathroom seemed to be rising. After a long time, the two separated. They were both panting heavily. Some things seemed to be just a step away. Water droplets slid down Sasha's exquisite collarbone. This scene looked so sexy. Clearly, Sasha was also mentally prepared. Duque was clearly looking at his sister, but the Windrunner sisters' beautiful faces reminded Duque of Aurelia. Sorry, let's stop here for today. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. At the very least, I hope to communicate with Aurelia first. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from outside the window. At least you have some humanity, Duque. Otherwise, I won't save you if my sister next to me gets mad. This was Servana's voice. Chapter 539. Duque and Sasha's neck stiffened. In the next moment, their reactions were very different. Duque was at a loss. Before he had transmigrated, he had been an engineering university student. In that place where sows competed with Diaochan, and there was no other place for men to release their male hormones unless they were engaged in homosexual activities, having a female friend was enough to be envied and hated by those roommates who joined the couple's dying group. The only thing that was lacking was to set them on fire. Perhaps Duque had great wisdom, or perhaps Duque was already a hero of the alliance. However, these things were useless to Duque, because he saw Aurelia's appearance. She was covered in dust, and there were abrasions on her neck, shoulders, ribs, and waist. Some were still bandaged, while others had clearly healed recently. From those shocking wounds, one could imagine how terrifying the battle between Aurelia and Servanas against Gromhelscream must have been. Those wounds were all near her vitals. Just how many times had she brushed shoulders with death? Just how many times had she barely escaped death, only to fall into despair again? Seeing Aurelia's heavy breathing, and seeing some of the bandaged wounds on her body start to bleed again due to her intense movements, Duque immediately thought about how Aurelia had received news that he was in danger after losing contact for many days. Then she had madly rushed back day and night. Just what kind of love was that? At this moment, Duque's mind was blank. Aurelia looked at Duque, deep in conflict. Duque's guess was right. She had endured her injuries and rushed back with all her might. Each piece of information regarding Duque made her feel more despair than the last. Duque had been ambushed by the number 1 Beastman Warlock, Ghoul, Dan, and the curse of death had reactivated on him. He was getting weaker by the day, and his life force was rapidly depleting. In order to save the Alliance from an absolute disadvantage, and also to redeem herself, Duque brought her third sister, Sasha, and a few others to form an assault team and infiltrate deep into the enemy's rear. There were countless flying dragons patrolling the skies, and nearly 200,000 orcs on the ground. Under such circumstances, they were ready to break into the Horde's heavily guarded grim battle fortress. How dangerous was that? What despair! Aurelia blamed herself. Why did he refuse to bring a mage with him for the sake of convenience? Why was it that when Duque needed her the most, she was wasting so much time on an unimportant tribal chief? If Duque died this time, Aurelia would never forgive herself. However, on the way, he received a piece of news. Duque was safe. Not only was he safe, but he had also become the Alliance's hero. He had actually led a team of 3 to successfully save the Red Dragon Queen. Duque let go of Sasha, who was still a little confused, and said to Aurelia, "Let's go for a walk." It wasn't a request or a plea. The firmness in his words made Aurelia feel that what Duque was about to say was the truth. Before Aurelia, who was already unsettled and about to have a breakdown, realized what was going on, Duque grabbed her hand and pulled her away like a puppet. The Dalijan State Guesthouse was very large. Although mages didn't care about aesthetics, the State Guesthouse was used to entertain national guests. Naturally, it couldn't be too shabby. In a quiet corner, Duque sat on a stone bench with a back. Then, Sasha sat down on Duque's left side obediently, and Aurelia sat on Duque's right side after half a second of hesitation. Duque took a deep breath and stroked Aurelia's golden hair. "Aurelia, you've worked hard recently. Can you tell me what you've been through recently?" Chapter 540. In that instant, the emotional defense that Aurelia had built up with so much difficulty collapsed. That dignified and elegant female ranger general who was the epitome of elves at almost all times suddenly cried like a child. "Boo-hoo!" Aurelia threw herself onto Duque's shoulder and grabbed onto Duque's shirt tightly. Her tears flowed down like a river, quickly dyeing Duque's blue mage robe from light blue to dark blue. In the end, it turned into Duque patting Aurelia's back lightly, and then Sasha pressing her hands on the back of her sister's hands. It was a very strange scene. The older Aurelia seemed more fragile, and the younger Sasha became the one who comforted her. After crying for a while, the crying and tears finally stopped. Aurelia used her lark-like voice to talk about what had happened in the past few days. Then, Sasha told her sister about the dangers of diving into the wetlands. It was very interesting. Both sisters had the same reaction. When Aurelia talked about how her neck was almost split in half by Grom's blood howl, Sasha's hands trembled. On the other hand, when Sasha said that she was about to die under the young dragon's breath, but was saved by Duque's ice barrier, Aurelia also shuddered. After the two sisters finished talking about their experiences, the air suddenly fell into a dead silence. At this moment, Duque actually wanted to say something, but realized that he didn't know what to say. But at this moment, the temperature of the air that had already begun to cool suddenly plummeted. Wait, shouldn't the two sisters be reconciling? What's wrong now? Duque was shocked to discover that an unknown battle aura that didn't belong to science or magic was compressing the air. The two sisters stood on the left and right, and Duque, who was sandwiched in the middle, felt that his body was suffocating from the mysterious power surging out of the two sisters. Duque cursed inwardly. Weren't the two sisters supposed to calm down and talk nicely? What was this terrifying feeling of stagnation? Aurelia elegantly took out a small handkerchief and wiped away the tears on her face. Since she didn't put on any makeup, she didn't have to worry about ruining her makeup like an internet celebrity on Earth. She smiled and regained her valiant and heroic posture. Aurelia gently flipped the blonde hair hanging down from her temples and proudly raised her extremely lethal hygel peaks. "All right, sister. I acknowledge that you have the qualifications to snatch my man. However, I will use my strength to make you give up. The relationship I've had with Duque for many years isn't something you can surpass just by spending 2 weeks with him." Duque almost bit off his tongue and swallowed it back into his stomach. "Damn it, after saying so much, you just think that my sister is qualified to fight with you? However, was it a good idea to use such a big move? This was a time kill." On the other side, Sasha didn't back down. She lightly flipped her silver hair and stretched her perfect long legs. "I won't give up. Sometimes, even an instant is enough to surpass tens of thousands of years of mediocrity, let alone 2 weeks. I believe in my choice, and I also believe in my own charm." All right, resplendent instant is greater than eternity, is out. Before Duque finished complaining in his heart, the two sisters saw that the other party wasn't moved and suddenly changed their target at the same time. "Duque!" The The two sisters looked at Duque and said in unison, Duque, who do you choose? Jusu. This situation had already surpassed jealousy and the fight between sisters. This was more like a kind of recognition of their confidence and beauty. But what kind of joke was this? Both of them were famous heroines in the future. Both of them were such amazing beauties. God actually made me have to choose one of them? And there was no way to avoid it. I had to make a choice now, immediately. What kind of harem is this? This was clearly the most tragic shuraba between sisters. No retreat. No compromise. I have to choose. A terrifying feeling of being roasted by two great demons, one big and one small, arose spontaneously. What should I do? What should I do? What to do? The cry in his heart was destined to not receive a response. As the focus of the two sisters' gazes, Duque only felt that every second was like a year. That's right, every second was the torture of reincarnation level by level in the 18 levels of hell. But in the next second, Duque felt a wave of grievance. As a pure man, why do I have to choose between other people's choices? Nonsense. When did I become the kind of man who was led around by a woman? Suddenly, Duque stood up, his right hand seemingly waving casually in his mage robe. He looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle and then turned his head, revealing an expression that was clearly smiling but actually crying. His eyes quickly condensed with moisture, and 2 seconds later, a turbid tear slid down his cheek. Under the moonlight, the tear could clearly be seen that the entire face was divided into two halves. Duque's voice was full of solemnity. I am an only child, I have no brothers or sisters. But I believe that it must be a very beautiful thing to have a sister who has accompanied me for 1,000 years. To make such a close pair of sisters have to decide the winner and the loser for a man, such a cruel thing. I can't do it. Duque? Aurelia was a little panicked. Wait. Sasha panicked even more. Instead of forcing the two of you to decide the winner and the loser, I will make the decision. The three of us will all be the losers. After saying these words in the deepest voice, Duque raised his feet and was about to leave. In the blink of an eye, a sharp sword suddenly cut through the night sky and was nailed less than 5 millimeters in front of the tip of Duque's foot. The powerful force attached to the sword was still trembling after it shot through the garden tiles. Servanaz's angry voice suddenly came. I said, if you hurt any of them, I will kill you. A cold smile appeared on Duque's face. If you kill me, that's fine. The Alliance has won anyway, and I have nothing to worry about. Then, under the shocked gazes of the three Windrunner sisters, Duque continued to stride forward. Stop! Another arrow was shot at Duque's foot. This time, Queen Sylvanas's voice was fierce. This is the last warning. But Duque still didn't stop. He sighed softly. If my death can solve the problem, then let me die. No, wait, Sina. Aurelia was also anxious. She hurriedly stood up. Second sister, no. Aurelia even pounced on her. At this moment, Servanas shot out her strongest arrow. The arrow contained the power of thunder. Almost as soon as it was shot, it exploded in the garden. The sharp sword shot at Duque with the anger and determination of Queen Sylvanas. Chapter 541. The three sisters did not expect that Duque would not dodge or use magic. He would actually use his own flesh and blood to meet the arrow head-on. A look of relief appeared on his face, which wasn't particularly handsome but could be considered delicate. That's right, relief. To the two sisters, the 17-year-old Duque shouldn't have such an expression. His homeland was destroyed by the orcs, but he didn't give up. His capital was occupied by the orcs, but he didn't give up. The alliance was at its worst. More than 3 kingdoms' capitals were destroyed. Even Rotterdam, the leader of the alliance, was almost destroyed, but he didn't give up. He didn't give up even when he was faced with the extraordinary Red Dragon army, or when he was cursed with the cruelest life-draining curse. But at this moment, Duque chose to give up for the first time in his life due to the difficulties of his feelings. And what he gave up was his life. Duque's choice shocked them. It was a shock that reached the depths of their souls. Idiot. Flesh. Queen Sylvia's angry face finally showed a look of surprise. "Duque, don't be silly," Aurelia exclaimed. She thought of Duque's magical mirror image spell. "No!" As she screamed, Sasha thought of the magical scene of Duque activating ice barrier at the last moment. So, both Aurelia and Sasha hesitated for a moment. But, under the sisters' exaggerated dynamic vision, Servana's arrow pierced Duque's chest without any resistance. The piercing sound of the arrow tearing through the mage's robe was unbearable to the sisters' sharp elven ears. In the next moment, blood splattered everywhere. The blood splattered at the speed of the arrow, stimulating the sisters' visual nerves to the maximum. This was real. There were no magical waves at all. Duque was really going to die for love, just because they were forced by the sisters. The greatest hero in the history of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, did not die at the hands of the millions of orcs, did not die under the dragon breath of the controlled Red Dragon Legion, did not die under the pursuit of Deathwing, but because of a relationship? Absolutely not. Whether it was out of love or reason, the two sisters had never thought of forcing Duque to this extent. They had never thought that Duque would be in so much pain because of their coercion. In the end, the two sisters attacked at the same time. Boom! A bolt of lightning flashed. Time seemed to freeze. In the garden, the four of them froze as if they had been hit by a spell that stopped time. On a tree 10 meters away, Servanas maintained his stiff shooting posture. On the ground, Sasha's right hand grabbed the tail of her second sister's arrow. Most of the lightning on it went to her seemingly weak arm, and her fingers were pitch black. In the middle, Aurelia's left hand grabbed the middle of the arrow shaft. The high-speed friction almost scraped off the skin of the Windrunner's fingers, leaving a ghastly trail of blood on the shaft. At the back, Duque puffed out his chest. The sharp arrowhead had already pierced through Duque's chest and ribs. If it had been half an inch more, it would have pierced through his heart and killed Duque. But it was just a little bit more. Duque survived after all. Are you crazy? The two sisters turned and cursed at the same time. Crazy? Maybe. But it's better than having you two fight it out. I'm sorry, I really can't make a choice. It was his left eye just now, and it was his right eye this time. A second tear rolled down from Duque's face. Seeing her eldest sister and third sister's expressions, Servanas finally realized that she had been the bad guy for nothing this time. This queen, whose name was feared by countless people in the future, could only clench her teeth, stomp her feet, and leave. What was left was only an angry curse. You got off easy, you little brat. The commotion in the garden of the state guest house couldn't be hidden from anyone. Luckily, Gavin Rad was still responsible. He asked Vanessa to chase away the onlookers, and forced himself to be a third wheel to treat Duque and the other two's wounds. Actually, Servanas had held back. If she had used her full strength, the two sisters wouldn't have been able to heal him so quickly. The state guest house finally quieted down after midnight. On the balcony, Duque and the two sisters kissed goodbye. Aurelia took the lead, and Sasha could only watch her eldest sister angrily. Then she used the same amount of time without backing down. Not a minute more, not half a second less. It felt like the two sisters had made some sort of agreement that Duque didn't know about. Rest early. You have an alliance meeting tomorrow morning, right? Aurelia said with concern. Yes. You have to miss me. Sasha was even simpler. After finally chasing away the Windrunner sisters, Duque could finally sleep peacefully. Sleeping on the soft bed, Duque let out a long sigh and thought to himself, luckily I'm quick-witted, risking my life and losing my moral integrity to revive. I don't even want to lose one. That's right, it was all a ploy. Who asked Duque to revive? Anyway, he would find a chance to get his moral integrity back in the future. If he really hurt anyone's heart and caused them to walk down the path of sorrow, Duque would never be able to forgive himself. Duque quickly fell asleep, in less than 5 minutes. In a daze, Duque was ambushed. Duque opened his eyes, and his vision was filled with that head of shiny golden hair that seemed to glow even in the middle of the night. Aurelia? Damn it. She actually dared to sneak away at this time? Didn't the two sisters make some sort of agreement not to sneak away or something? Duque had just pretended to be benevolent and said that he couldn't choose between the two, and now he was with Aurelia. Wasn't that just slapping his own mouth? Duque wanted to reject immediately, but who knew that Aurelia would seal Duque's lips with a tender finger? Perhaps Duque could find 10,000 reasons to refuse, but who knew that one sentence from Aurelia would settle Duque? What she said was, "I miss you. I miss you," and "I love you" were both extremely simple words. Any writer could create countless attributives and adjectives for this sentence, but in the end, none of them could be as straightforward and powerful as this simple sentence. This sentence easily triggered the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. The feelings that Duque had also suppressed for a long time poured out in an instant. System notification. You have used lacerating strike on Aurelia's armor. You have used suppression. You have used Duque's godly sword 999 combo. Boss Aurelia has been defeated and has entered paralyzed state. Finally, he won. At this time, a pair of arms suddenly wrapped around Duque's neck from behind, and in the corner of Duque's eyes, he saw a similar shining silver light. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.